The syringe slipped from Sherlock Holmes's trembling fingers, clattering against the worn Persian rug in the dim gaslight of his Baker Street sitting room. His hawk-like eyes, usually sharp as scalpels, glazed over with the familiar haze, pupils dilated to black pits swallowing the December gloom. The cocaine coursed through his veins like liquid fire, chasing away the void that gnawed at him, the endless ennui that no violin melody or chemical equation could fully silence. But tonight, as the clock struck 2 on that frigid morning of December 24th, 1888, the rush faltered, leaving only a deeper chill seeping into his gaunt frame. He slumped back in the armchair, his deerstalker cap askew on disheveled dark curls, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal track marks like faint constellations on his forearms. The air hung heavy with the acrid tang of morphine residue and unwashed teacups piled on the mantel. Outside, the pea soup fog muffled the distant clip-clop of horse-drawn carriages and the faint ethereal swell of carolers from Baker Street. Silent night, holy night, their voices mocking the chaos within. Holmes's mind, that relentless engine of deduction, spun fragments. The Ripper's shadow still haunting Whitechapel headlines, unsolved echoes in Mayfair's parlours, his own body betraying him faster than any adversary. A sharp rap at the door jolted him upright. Not Mrs. Hudson at this hour. She'd long since retired, muttering prayers for his soul under her breath. He rose unsteadily, pipe clenched between teeth, and cracked the door to reveal Dr. John Watson, moustache dusted with frost, greatcoat buttoned tight against the biting wind. Watson's warm brown eyes widened at the sight, taking in the syringe, the scattered papers on the 7% solution, the hollow cheeks of his friend. "Sherlock, good God," Watson breathed, pushing inside without invitation, his sturdy frame filling the threshold. His scarred hand from Afghan battlefields gripped Holmes's elbow, steady but firm. "You're killing yourself." Again. Holmes waved him off, collapsing back into the chair, a ghost of his former vigor. "Elementary, my dear Watson. Boredom is the true assassin. This merely buys time." His voice, precise and clipped, carried the aristocratic lilt of his abandoned family estate, laced now with a raw edge. But inside doubt flickered, a rare intruder in his rational fortress. The cocaine's false clarity sharpened memories, his brother Mycroft's distant disapproval, the empty halls of their childhood home, the women who came and went like vapors. Intellect had conquered crimes, but left him adrift, a machine without purpose. Watson knelt, retrieving the syringe with practiced care, his army surgeon's hands gentle despite the worry etching lines around his eyes. Orphaned young, he'd found camaraderie in Holmes after the war's carnage, chronicling their adventures to stave off his own ghosts. Time for what? Another case? Scotland Yard's buzzing, but not for you. Not like this. He straightened, pouring water from the ewer into a glass, forcing it into Holmes's hand. "Drink, and listen." Holmes sipped, the cool liquid grounding him as Watson lit the fire, flames dancing shadows across chemical apparatus and unanswered letters. Watson's speech, straightforward with a soldier's directness, contrasted Holmes's elliptical precision. Mayfair's in panic. 67 families. Sherlock, affluent Holmes Christmas pudding served after midnight mass. Arsenic, they think. Lords, ladies, children, foaming at the mouth, convulsing by the hearth. Gregson's on it, but he's floundering. Pudding makers cleared, ingredients pure. It's deliberate, targeted. The elite whispering of curses, Ripper's revenge creeping westward. Holmes's grey eyes sharpened, the fog in his mind parting like the Thames at low tide. Poisoned puddings, a symphony of symptoms, nausea, paralysis, death in holiday cheer. But 67 households, logistics alone screamed design. His pulse quickened, not from the drug, but the puzzle's siren call. Targeted how? Victims linked? Watson hesitated, rubbing his moustache. All attended St. George's Christmas Eve service, Hanover Square. And whispers of a shadow in the fog, watching from the pews. Church. The word hung, unbidden. Holmes scoffed inwardly, superstition for the masses, deduction for the elect. Yet Watson's faith, quiet and unshakable, had anchored him through darker nights. Superstition sells papers, Watson. Arsenic traces the supply chain. I'll need samples. You're in no state. Watson's voice softened, paternal almost. This addiction, it's not boredom, it's escape. From what, I wonder? The human heart you dissect so neatly. Holmes turned away, staring into the fire's glow. Escape from the void, yes, from the realization that minds alone built nothing eternal. The carolers swelled outside. All is calm, all is bright. Lies, all of it. But the case tugged. A lifeline amid the abyss. He stood, swaying slightly, retrieving his Inverness cape. Rock bottom, Watson? Perhaps, but puzzles wait for no man. To Mayfair. They stepped into the fog-shrouded night. Hansom cabs summoned with a whistle. Baker Street receded, gas lamps flickering like dying stars. Holmes's mind raced ahead. Arsenic volatility, pudding recipes, plum duff, sweat, brandy flames. But faith? A variable unquantified. Watson climbed in beside him, revolver bulging in his pocket, ever the protector. The cab rattled toward Mayfair's opulent squares, where mansions loomed like iced fortresses. First stop, Hale Manor, Lady Victoria Hale's residence, one of the few survivors, her household untouched. Whispers said she'd hosted the vicar that night, her emerald eyes drawing confessions from the dying. Holmes inhaled the fog's damp chill, cocaine's afterglow sharpening senses, horse manure, coal smoke, underlying fear. At Hale Manor, footmen in livery admitted them reluctantly, the air inside thick with evergreen boughs and beeswax polish. Lady Victoria descended the grand staircase, raven hair pinned in elegant updo, porcelain skin luminous in candlelight. At 32, widow of shipping magnate Lord Hale, she moved with predatory grace. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, come to unravel Mayfair's nightmare. Her voice, husky with a hint of Mayfair scandal, wrapped around them. Holmes noted the tremor in her gloved hand, fear or guilt. Lady Hale, your pudding, untouched. She led them to the drawing room. Fire roaring, portraits of stern ancestors glaring down. Served but rejected, a whim. Others, not so fortunate. Her emerald eyes met Holmes, challenging. The church unites us, yet divides in death. Coincidence? Watson shifted uncomfortably, sensing undercurrents. Holmes paced, inhaling scents. Cinnamon, cloves, faint metallic tang beneath. Arsenic hid well in sweets. As dawn greyed the fog, a knock echoed. Inspector Tobias Gregson, burly frame squeezing through the door, ruddy face scowling under bushy whiskers. Holmes, Yard's orders. You consult, nothing more. His plodding tone grated, debts weighing his every word. Holmes smirked faintly. Orders change with evidence, Gregson. But as Gregson laid out victim ledgers, Holmes' vision blurred, the cocaine crashing, stomach roiling. He gripped the mantle, sweat beading. Rock-bottom whispered, solve this or succumb. Lady Hale watched, a tempter's smile playing. Watson steadied him unseen. Outside, church bells tolled Christmas morning, calling the faithful. Yet in Holmes's fracturing mind a seed stirred, not deduction alone, but something deeper. What if the poison wasn't mere chemistry, but a soul's poison tested in holiday light? This story is created by a young creator whose dream is to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you enjoy these tales, subscribing helps more than you know, and he thanks you for it. Mysteries that challenge your mind and reward attention unfold from here. As the first victim's final words surfaced in Gregson's report, the shadow prayed. Holmes wondered if faith held clues his science ignored, but deeper still, his own shadow loomed larger. The fog clung thicker to Mayfair's streets as Christmas morning wore on, muffling the distant chime of St. Augustine's bells. Sherlock Holmes steadied himself against the mantel in Lady Victoria Hale's drawing room, the cocaine's cruel ebb pulling at his veins like icy fingers. His hawk-like nose twitched at the lingering scent of cloves masking something sharper, death's quiet alchemy. Inspector Gregson hunched over the ledger, his burly frame casting a shadow across the parchment, bushy side whiskers quivering as he muttered about the 67 families struck down in a single night's feasting. 67. The number echoed in Holmes's fracturing mind, a puzzle laced with impossibility. Arsenic in plum puddings served from the church hall after midnight mass, coordinated, deliberate. Yet no traces in Lady Hale's batch, rejected on a widow's whim. He forced his piercing grey eyes to focus, dark curls damp against his forehead, the deerstalker cap left on a side table like a shed skin. Watson caught his arm, warm brown eyes shadowed under the walrus moustache, his scarred hand firm from Afghan battlefields. "Steady now, old chap," he whispered, voice low and steady like a surgeon's incision. Holmes nodded faintly, the room spinning slower. Gregson glanced up, ruddy face creasing in perpetual scowl. First victim, Sir Reginald Thorne, banker from Grosvenor Square. Collapsed mid-carol, clutching his throat. Last words to his wife. The shadow prayed over the bowl. Holmes seized the detail, mind sharpening despite the haze. A shadow. Not the Ripper's ghost, those Whitechapel horrors still fresh in London's paranoia, but something sanctified, twisted, prayed, faith intruding on his realm of chemistry and logic. He paced the Persian rug, gaunt frame at 6 feet 1 inch weaving through velvet chairs, inhaling the fire's smoke mingled with cinnamon ghosts. Lady Hale watched from the settee, raven hair pinned in Gibson girl elegance, emerald eyes unblinking on porcelain skin. Her gloved hand steadied a teacup, tremor gone now, or mastered. Financial ruin whispered in her ledgers, Holmes recalled from society columns. Lord Hale's ships sunk by storms and bad debts. She rose with predatory grace, skirts whispering. "Shall we visit St. Augustine's, Mr. Holmes?" "The vicar awaits." Professor Elias Crowe, frail soul, oversaw the puddings himself. Gregson grunted, snapping the ledger shut. "Yard's handling the church. You lot stay put." But Holmes was already at the door, Watson trailing, the chill December air slapping his face like absolution denied. Horse-drawn carriages splashed through puddles on cobblestone, gas lamps flickering yellow halos in pea-soup fog. Carolers huddled under scarves, their hymns fractured, tidings of comfort and joy, but joy curdled here. St. Augustine's loomed neo-Gothic spires piercing the gloom, stained glass saints gazing indifferently from leaded panes. The churchyard graves frosted white, wreaths wilted on fresh mounds. Inside, the sanctuary smelled of incense and damp stone, pews polished to gleam under candlelight. Professor Elias Crowe shuffled from the altar, 60s frailty bent like an ancient oak, stooped shoulders draped in cassock, wire-rimmed spectacles magnifying watery blue eyes behind thinning white hair. His hands, veined and trembling, clutched a prayer book scarred by years. "Mr. Holmes," he rasped, voice a parchment whisper, honed by sermons. "God's mercy in this trial, the puddings, blessed by my hands for the parish feast. 67 souls called home too soon." Holmes knelt by a side table, still bearing a pudding bowl, porcelain cracked, remnants crusted. He scraped a sample with a penknife, nose inches from the surface. Sweetness overlaid by antimony's bite. No, arsenic's subtlety, pure white powder, odorless in sugar's embrace. But the shadow. Crowe paled, spectacles slipping. A parishioner spoke of a figure in robes, murmuring grace over the vats. I saw no one. Christmas vigil, all in prayer. Watson examined the vicar's face, sturdy build tense, moustache bristling. Guilt there, or grief? Holmes pocketed the sample, mind flashing back, not to cases past, but his own abyss. 2 years prior, boredom's void after Moriarty's shadow faded. The 7% solution, needle's kiss in Baker Street gaslight. First rush, clarity divine, puzzles unfolding like God's own blueprint. Then the crashes, knights curled on the rug, violins silent, Watson's footsteps retreating in helpless fury. Rock bottom? Not yet, but close, as withdrawal clawed now, stomach twisting, vision greying. Lady Hale arrived, silk rustling, her presence a temptation's perfume, jasmine laced with desperation. Her family's pew here, she said softly, gliding close. Father tithed fortunes to this stone. Now poison mocks it. Holmes met her gaze, noting the flicker, seduction as shield, legacy crumbling like Hale's empire. Gregson burst in, boots thudding, coat shedding fog droplets. Post-mortem on Thorn confirms arsenic, massive dose. All puddings from the church kitchen. Crowe, you're first for questioning. The professor sagged, murmuring psalms under breath. The Lord is my shepherd. Outside, Holmes leaned against a yew tree, bark rough under palm, cold seeping through thin wool. Watson beside him, breath clouding. You pushed too hard, Holmes. Cocaine's no ally today. Holmes straightened, gaunt cheeks hollowing. The puzzle demands it, Watson. Shadows praying, delirium or design. Faith's blind spot, perhaps. Yet his voice cracked, inner vice tightening. Rationalism his fortress, but cracks widened. The human cost 67 graves stirred something primal. They trudged to the morgue wagon parked discreetly behind the church, canvas flapping in wind. Gregson yanked it open, revealing sheet-draped forms, faces pallid under frost-kissed brows. Holmes lifted one, Sir Reginald's, eyes staring sightless. Lips blue-flecked, froth at mouth, classic arsenical sign, but etched in memory. The man's club tie, Mayfair crest, all elite, all church tithers. Lady Hale hovered, gloved hand to mouth. Reginald begged for seconds. Holmes turned, piercing eyes locking hers. Your whim saved you. Hers. Luck or knowledge? She smiled faintly, emerald depths unreadable. Divine intervention, Mr. Holmes. As dusk bled crimson through fog, they returned to Hale Manor, fire rekindled. Holmes mixed a bromide solution in the study, hands shaking, Watson watching silent vigil. Gregson poured maps, plotting victim homes, a web centered on St. Augustine's. Crowe summoned for more, his frailty cracking under questions. No enemies, he insisted. Parish pure. But Holmes's mind raced, withdrawal's fire forging clarity. Flashback surged. Abandoned family estate in Yorkshire, boyhood fencing lessons, chemistry sets birthing deductions God. Father gone early, mother fading, rationality his orphan's armor. Now, poisoner wielded faith as weapon, red herring or revelation. Night deepened, bells tolling evensong. Lady Hale poured brandy, her touch lingering on Holmes's glass. Rest, detective. Mayfair's secrets keep till morn. Temptation coiled, her scandals whispered. Lovers, debts, a will contested. Watson pulled Holmes aside, voice urgent. She's drawing you in. Fight it. Holmes nodded, but shadow loomed, his own. The cocaine vial burned in his pocket, siren call amid the case's roar. Then Gregson's shout from the hall, another clue. A pudding bowl from the church vat. Hidden in bushes. Fingerprints, no. Prayer beads clutched in residue. Rosary ebony snapped. Holmes snatched it, beads cool against fevered skin. Whose faith poisoned joy? And as pain lanced his gut, deeper question gnawed. Could his own redemption lie not in solution, but surrender? The beads slipped through fingers, one rolling into shadow, vanishing like truth half glimpsed. What prayer had broken here, and what would it cost to mend? Holmes knelt in the shadowed hall of Hale Manor, the ebony rosary beads scattering like dark confetti across the Persian rug. His fingers, still trembling from the day's unrelenting ache, chased the errant one into the gloom beneath a mahogany sideboard. It rolled defiant, stopping just beyond reach. Watson's voice cut the silence, steady as a surgeon's scalpel. Let it go, Holmes, it's just a trinket. Gregson needs us at the church by dawn. But Holmes's hawk-like eyes narrowed, the beads gleam, pulling him like a suspect's alibi. Not just any trinket, Watson, snapped under duress. Prayer interrupted by poison, or something far more deliberate. He withdrew his hand, empty, the withdrawal gnawing deeper now, a hollow fire in his veins. The cocaine vial weighed heavier in his waistcoat pocket, whispering promises of clarity amid the fog. Lady Victoria Hale appeared in the doorway, her raven hair loosened from its Gibson girl updo, cascading like spilled ink over her emerald velvet gown. The firelight danced across her porcelain skin, casting shadows that softened her elegance into something almost vulnerable. "Gentlemen," she said softly, her voice a melody laced with Mayfair polish, yet edged with fatigue. "You've uncovered enough horrors for one night. My carriage awaits for St. Augustine's." Holmes rose, gaunt frame unfolding to his full height, deerstalker cap askew. "Your hospitality masks a storm, Lady Hale. That pudding spared you, why?" She met his piercing grey eyes without flinching, though her gloved hand tightened on the doorframe. Divine whim, perhaps, or the saints favouring widows. A faint smile played on her lips, but Holmes caught the flicker, the subtle dilation of her pupils, the quickened breath. Fear, guilt, or the thrill of the game. Gregson lumbered in, his burly form filling the space, ruddy cheeks flushed from brandy. "Church vat's the key," he growled, side whiskers bristling. All victims supped there post-carols. Professor Crowe's sermon on gluttony's wages. Ironic, eh? "Man's shaky as a leaf, swears innocence. Innocence is a luxury for the unimaginative," Holmes muttered, pocketing the rosary remnants. Watson clapped a hand on his shoulder, firm, grounding. The touch anchored him momentarily, a bulwark against the siren call. Rest now. The mind sharpens in repose. They retired to the manor's guest wing, gas lamps hissing low. Holmes paced his chamber, the four-poster bed mocking his insomnia. Outside, December's chill clawed at frost-laced windows, pea-soup fog muffling distant carriage wheels and faint carol echoes. God rest ye, merry gentlemen, twisted now into dirge. His mind replayed the parlour scene, blue-flecked lips, Reginald's greedy joy turned agony. Flashback pierced, his own boyhood in the Yorkshire estate, snow-blanketing moors, father drilling fencing lunges, while mother brewed herbal tonics. "Observe, Sherlock," father had barked, aquiline nose mirroring his son's. "Truth hides in the overlooked." But father fled to India. Mother withered in grief, leaving rationality as his sole inheritance. Cocaine had filled the void, 7% solution chasing ennui's dragon. Now, Mayfair's elite lay felled by arsenic-laced pudding, 67 souls teetering toward eternity. No random act. This bore calculation, a poisoner cloaked in festivity. Holmes extracted the vial, crystalline powder glinting, one prick of the needle, and deduction's blaze would return. His pulse thundered, sweat beading despite the cold. Watson's words echoed, "Fight it." Dawn broke grey and grudging, fog thicker than sin. The quartet arrived at St. Augustine's, the Gothic spire piercing heavenward like an accusation. Stone facade wept with ice, stained glass saints gazing indifferently through rime. Inside, the nave smelled of incense and stale mince pies, pews scuffed from panicked feet. Professor Elias Crowe awaited by the altar, frail 60-something frame hunched in black cassock, liver-spotted hands clasped over a leather-bound Bible. His watery blue eyes darted, voice quavering with Oxford burr. "Mr. Holmes, a tragedy befalling our flock. The pudding vat, sanctified for the poor box fate. I stirred it myself after prayers." Holmes circled the massive copper vat in the vestry, now cordoned by constables. Residue crusted the sides, crystalline flecks winking under lantern light. Arsenic confirmed, but laced post-stirring. "Your rosary matches the victim's, Professor," snapped in haste. Crowe's face blanched, wrinkles deepening like fault lines. "Mine. Stolen weeks past, from the sacristy. Thieves abound in fog-shrouded nights." He crossed himself, breath ragged. Lady Hale lingered at the vestry door, emerald eyes scanning icons. A parishioner, perhaps, motive in malice toward the tithers. Gregson snorted, mapping victim pins on a parish roll, Hale Manor at epicenter. "Your shipping fortune fed many bowls, ma'am." Debts whisper loud. Her laugh tinkled brittle. "Scandals are Mayfair's perfume, Inspector. Mine are perfumed enough without murder." Holmes inhaled deeply, the chapel's chill air sharp on his tongue, battling the itch. Deduction clashed with craving. The rosary's maker, ebony from Italian imports, Hale ship's route, Crowe's tremor, not age, but knowledge. Watson noted his pallor, murmured close, "You're fading, old chap. Lean on me." Mid-morning mass tolled, organ wheezing, "O come all ye faithful." Parishioners trickled in, whispers buzzing like flies. Holmes slipped into a rear pew, observing. An elderly tither clutched a similar bowl remnant, uneaten, spared by suspicion. A young acolyte mopped the floor, eyes downcast. seeds planted. Faith's vessel turned venomous chalice. Outside, snow dusted the churchyard graves, wind-whipping cloaks. Gregson collared a gravedigger, unearthing motives in fresh-dug plots. Holmes confronted Crowe alone by the yew tree, bark rough under gloved palm. Your sermon warned of poison in plenty. Prophetic or prescient? The professor leaned on his cane, voice a rasp. Gluttony devours the soul, Mr. Holmes, as does pride in one's reason. Faith mends what logic fractures. Holmes's hand twitched toward the vial, hidden. Pride or survival? Watson approached, moustache frosted. Another victim. Lady Hargrove's ball. Pudding served from your vat, Professor. She convulses now. Crowe's cane slipped, knees buckling. God forgive. Lady Hale steadied him, her touch lingering. Courage, Elias. Truth emerges, but Holmes saw the exchange, eyes locking too long, a current unspoken. Red herring or the hook. By noon, Hale Manor again, luncheon sparse, clear broth, no sweets. Holmes retreated to the study, mixing another bromide, hands steadier yet soul adrift. Watson sat vigil, pipe smoke curling like unanswered prayers. You've glimpsed the pattern, Holmes. Church web, elite victims. But the why gnaws. Holmes stared into the fire, flames licking logs like arsenic tongues. Vengeance, inheritance, or crusade against Mayfair's hypocrisy. Flashback, his own nadir, syringe empty, Baker Street blurred in haze. Watson dragging him back, loyalty unbroken. Change beckoned then, ignored. Gregson burst in, snow-cloaked, fresh lead, a maid from the vestry. Saw Crowe arguing with a hooded figure night before fate, Italian accent. Holmes surged up, clarity piercing fog. Withdrawal's gift? Crowe denies, but the rosary. Lady Hale entered, decanter in hand. Brandy fortifies, gentlemen. Evening brings more shadows. Temptation coiled anew, her perfume heady, scandal's allure pulling. Watson's gaze sharpened. Holmes, the vial. He palmed it away, resolve cracking. Night fell, bells tolling compline. In the mirror, his gaunt reflection stared back. Addict, detective, seeker. The poisoner's prayer broken, his own whispered silently, hold. Yet as footsteps echoed below, a late visitor to Crowe, the bead's shadow lengthened. Truth half-glimpsed demanded pursuit, but at what fracture of self? Comment if you've known someone who found their way back. Footsteps creaked on the polished oak stairs of Hale Manor, deliberate and unhurried, slicing through the hush like a scalpel through flesh. Holmes froze before the mirror, his reflection a hollow-cheeked spectre, grey eyes shadowed by the cocaine's lingering siege. The vial burned in his palm, a serpent's promise of clarity amid the storm now ravaging his veins, withdrawal's vice tightening, every nerve alight with phantom itches. Below, Professor Elias Crowe's voice rose, frail yet edged with fervour, mingling with a stranger's murmur, accented, low. Watson stirred from his armchair by the fire, pipe clenched between teeth, his sturdy frame tensing like a coiled spring. Holmes, he whispered, slipping a hand to the revolver in his coat. Shall we? Holmes pocketed the vial, resolve a fragile thread. Observe first. Truth hides in the unsaid. They descended silently, gas lamps flickering along the corridor, casting elongated shadows that danced like accusing fingers. The drawing-room door stood ajar, warm light spilling out, heavy with the scent of beeswax candles and aged leather. Crowe hunched in his wingback chair, cane propped beside him, his frail form dwarfed by the hooded figure kneeling at his feet. Dark cloak damp from snow, face obscured save for olive skin and a glint of gold tooth. Father Rossi, Crowe murmured, clasping the man's hands. You've come from the mission. The Italian priest nodded, rosary beads clicking softly. See, Professor, the brothers pray for you, but this poison, it spreads like the devil's whisper through Whitechapel. The poor take the blame, yet Mayfair feasts on tainted platters. Holmes stepped into the light, deerstalker casting his face in half-shadow. Gentlemen, a night visit merits explanation. Father Rossi, was it? The vestry maid saw you arguing. Rossi rose fluidly, hood falling back to reveal sharp features, black eyes unblinking. Argue, We plead, Mr. Holmes. The church feeds the hungry with puddings from Crowe's vats, charity from the elite. Now 67 souls twist in agony. Gluttony devours, as Elias says. Crowe nodded wearily, liver-spotted hands trembling. Faith demands confession, Sherlock. My vats supplied all. But purity tested. Arsenic slipped in shadows. Lady Victoria Hale glided in then, silk gown whispering, emerald eyes flashing concern masked as poise. Father? Brandy? The cold bites deep. Her perfume enveloped Holmes, heady jasmine laced with something darker, stirring memories of Baker Street nights lost to haze. Temptation coiled, his hand twitching toward the pocket. Watson cleared his throat pointedly, moustache bristling. No spirits, Holmes said sharply, more to himself. The pattern sharpens. Church distributions, elite donors, Italian whispers. Vengeance from the slums against Mayfair's excess. Rossi crossed himself, beads swaying. Blasphemy. We serve the least. But Crowe, debts mount, shipping losses, whispers of scandal. Lady Hale's hand lingered on Crowe's shoulder, a touch too intimate. Elias endangers no one. Holmes's mind raced, piecing fragments amid the fog encroaching. Head pounding, limbs leaden. Withdrawal clawed deeper, vision blurring at edges, yet deduction burned brighter. Red herring swims in plain sight. Dawn broke grey over Mayfair, fog thicker than remorse. Muffling carriage wheels on snow-dusted streets. Gregson waited at Scotland Yard, his burly frame crammed behind a desk piled with telegrams, ruddy face flushed. "Holmes, you ghost," maid confirms. Hooded Italian, gesturing wildly at Crowe. Motive? Watson settled into a worn chair, nursing tea, eyes watchful on Holmes, whose gaunt cheeks hollowed further, sweat beading despite the chill. "Father Rossi," Holmes replied flatly. "Missionary zeal or cover for grudge? Test the rosaries. Trace the silver." Gregson grunted, side whiskers quivering. "Already on it. But Lady Hargrove clings. Pudding from Hale's fate. Your lady friend hosts again tonight." Trap. Holmes's pulse thundered, not from case but craving, the vile a talisman against unraveling. Effort and grace. Watson had murmured last night, quoting some vicar. Grace? Logic's bastard child. By noon, Hale Manor once more, the sanctuary of its high ceilings now claustrophobic, portraits of stern ancestors judging silently. Lady Hale poured tea in the morning room, porcelain clinking, steam rising like fleeting hopes. Professor Crowe absent, claiming rest. "You suspect Elias, Mr. Holmes. After all he's endured." Her voice silk over steel, emerald gaze probing. Holmes leaned forward, hawk-like nose casting shadow, fighting the tremor in his fingers. Endured what, precisely? Financial ruin? Or spiritual bankruptcy? She laughed softly, raven hair catching light. Touché. Widows no ruins bite. But faith. Elias clings to it like rosary beads. Watson interjected, warm eyes steady. "Faith mans, Holmes. You've seen it drag men from pit. The word echoed Holmes's nadir. Syringe plunged, world dissolving into euphoric void. Watson's face the anchor hauling him back. Change, then? Dismissed as weakness. A scream shattered the air, from the kitchens. Servants scattered as they burst in, finding the scullery maid collapsed amid flour sacks, frothing, a half-eaten pudding sample clutched in rigid fingers. Fresh batch, tainted. Holmes knelt, pulse racing, inhaling the almond-sweet reek masking death. Arsenic again, pure, delivered post-vat. Lady Hale blanched, porcelain skin paling further. Impossible. Elias oversees every measure. Gregson stormed in, bellowing orders, his scowl deepening. "Quarantine the manor." "Holmes, your web tightens, Crowe or her ladyship." As constables swarmed, Holmes retreated to the pantry shadows, vial slipping into hand. One prick, clarity. The fog thickened, doubts swarming. Was Crowe the angel preaching redemption, or tempter in priestly guise? Lady Hale's glance lingered, promising escape in scandal's embrace. Watson found him there, hand firm on shoulder. "Not this time, old chap." Grace first, effort follows. Holmes pocketed it, shame burning hotter than withdrawal. By evening the fate loomed, bait for poisoner. Gregson posted watchers, but Holmes paced the vestibule, every tick of the grandfather clock a hammer on his skull. Bodies now 68. Mayfair's Christmas cheer curdled to dread. Lady Hale approached, decanter gleaming. Brandy steals the nerves, Sherlock. Shadows lengthen. Her fingers brushed his, electric, pulling toward old haunts, Baker Street dens, cocaine's cold fire. Tempter incarnate, or mirror to his wreckage. He withdrew sharply. Steel lies in restraint, madam. Night fell, gaslights hazy orbs in fog, carolers' voices distant, hollow. Guests arrived cloaked in finery, laughter brittle. Holmes observed from balcony, Watson at side, revolver heavy. Crowe entered late, cane tapping, rosary dangling, silver glinting ominously. Then the hooded figure slipped through servant's door. Rossi. Or phantom. Holmes descended, heart pounding in sync with craving's roar. Confrontation beckoned, but as he reached the hall a gasp rippled, another guest swaying, plum duff untouched yet lips blue. Poison airborne? No. Laced goblets. Chaos erupted, Gregson shouting, Lady Hale fainting dramatically into Crowe's arms. Holmes snatched a glass, sniffing, belladonna trace, subtle. In the melee, Crowe met his gaze, eyes pleading. Faith, Sherlock, see beyond reason. But Holmes glimpsed it then. Rosary beads once swapped, etched not with crosses but initials. V.H. Lady Hale. Withdrawal peaked, world tilting, yet truth pierced. Betrayal nested closer. As Gregson dragged Rossi in chains, protesting innocence, Holmes staggered to Watson. The vial called louder, fracture widening. Yet in the din, a small chapel off the hall caught light, a candle flickering, Bible open to prodigal son. Pause there, or pursue the hook sinking deeper. 69 souls teetered, his own dangled by thread. Night's vice tightened. What visitor lurked yet unseen, whispering fall? Holmes clutched the banister, the polished oak slick under his palm, as the world spun in a haze of gaslight and panic. The fate's grand hall at Hale Manor reeked of overturned punch bowls, and the metallic tang of fear sweat mingled with the sickly sweet plum duff that had betrayed them all. 69 now. Another aristocrat slumped against a velvet settee, his face a mask of unnatural serenity, foam flecking his lips. Gregson bellowed orders, constables swarming like rats in the fog, while Lady Victoria Hale lay prostrate in Professor Crowe's arms, her raven hair spilling like ink over his threadbare tweed. Sherlock, Watson murmured at his elbow, voice steady as a surgeon's scalpel. You look like death warmed over. Let me get you some air. No time for air, Holmes rasped, shoving past a cluster of weeping debutantes. The rosary, Crowe's or hers? His mind clawed through the fog of withdrawal, synapses firing like faulty fireworks. The beads had glinted under the chandelier's prisms, initials etched deep, V.H. Not a cross, but a claim, Lady Hale's claim. Yet Crowe had clutched it, eyes wide with what, terror or cunning? He pushed into the chapel alcove off the hall, a narrow sanctum heavy with incense and beeswax. The candle flame danced, casting long shadows over the open Bible, its pages whispering of the prodigal son squandering his inheritance on swine and husks. Holmes's stomach twisted, not from hunger, but the 7% solution's siren call. The vial in his pocket burned like a coal, promising clarity amid this maelstrom. Just one prick, and the threads would weave themselves. Footsteps echoed, soft, deliberate. Crowe appeared in the doorway, cane thumping softly, his frail frame silhouetted against the hall's chaos. The rosary dangled from his free hand now, beads clicking like accusations. Mr. Holmes, the professor said, voice a gravelly timbre honed by decades of lecturing on ancient poisons. Seeking solace in scripture, or answers the good book can't provide? Holmes straightened, forcing steel into his spine. The beads, Professor. V.H. Victoria Hale. Does she peddle more than brandy in this house of merriment? Crowe's eyes, milky with age, sharpened. A gift from her late husband, or so she claims. But symbols twist, Sherlock, like your own vials. Remedies turned tormentors. He stepped closer, the air thickening with the scent of old books and camphor. I've seen men like you, brilliant flames guttering in boredom's wind. Faith isn't blind. It's the lens reason lacks. Reason suffices, Holmes snapped, but his hand trembled, betraying him. The chapel's chill seeped through his ulster, mirroring the ice in his veins. Outside, Gregson's roar cut through. Rossi's alibi holds. He was chained in the pantry. Another poisoner walks free. Lady Hale swept in then, gown dishevelled, emerald eyes flashing. Professor, you promised discretion. Sherlock, this hysteria serves no one. Her hand grazed his arm again, warm, insistent, fingers lingering like opium smoke. Come, let's speak privately. The conservatory, away from these brutes, temptation coiled, her perfume, jasmine laced with something sharper, belladonna. Stirring memories of Baker Street nights, syringe glinting. He could taste the cocaine's bite, the rush that silenced doubt. But Watson burst through, revolver still drawn, moustache bristling. Not now, Holmes. Gregson needs you. The goblets match the earlier traces. Airborne variant or sleight of hand? Holmes wrenched free, Lady Hale's touch lingering like a brand. Lead on, Doctor. But his legs buckled halfway down the corridor, vision blurring. Withdrawal's jaws clamped tighter, every heartbeat a thunderclap. They reached the butler's pantry, where Rossi knelt, manacled. His Italian features twisted in rage. Signor Detective, I serve the pudding, see? No, touch the glasses. The cloaked one, earlier, by the sideboard. Tall, hooded, vanished like ghost. Gregson grunted, rubbing his ruddy jowls. We've scoured the grounds. Fog's too thick. Holmes, your nose. Belladonna confirmed? Holmes knelt by a discarded goblet, inhaling deeply. Not just belladonna. Strychnine undertone masked by cloves, Christmas subtlety. He traced the rim, residue faint, but the lip smudged with rouge. Lady Hale's shade. Eyes turned to him, expectant. The weight pressed, his mind fracturing under craving's assault. Sweat beaded his brow, hawkish nose twitching. Professor Crowe hovered at the threshold, rosary beads now pocketed. Faith would unmask this, Sherlock, not force. Lady Hale's voice drifted from the hall, honeyed poison. Gentlemen, the night's ruined. Shall we adjourn to the drawing-room? Mulled wine for steadied nerves? Watson gripped Holmes's shoulder, firm anchor. Steady on, old chap. You've bested worse. But had he? The murders piled like snowdrifts. 69 families shattered, Mayfair's gaslit spires mocking their impotence. Holmes rose, staggering, vial's shape a torment in his pocket. He pocketed a goblet fragment, evidence cold comfort. As they filed back to the hall, carolers outside struck up, God rest ye merry gentlemen, voices muffled by fog, ironic dirge. In the drawing-room, crystal decanters gleamed, fire roaring in the grate. Gregson paced, side whiskers quivering. Motive. Hale's shipping fortune crumbles, poisoned rivals for inheritance. Lady Hale poured brandy, handing glasses with a tragic smile. To absent friends, her eyes locked on Holmes, challenging. Drink, Sherlock. It clears the mind. He accepted, the liquid fire burning down his throat, chasing shadows but stoking the beast within. No, restraint. He set it aside, untouched, half-drained. Talk, madam. Your husband's death. Poisoned, was it not? Whispers in the club. Her porcelain face cracked, just a fraction. Grief, Mr. Holmes, not murder. But her gaze flicked to Crowe, who sipped slowly, cane tapping a rhythm like a heartbeat. The professor cleared his throat. Ancient arts, Sherlock. Belladonna from my lectures. Deadly nightshade, biblical mentions in Revelations. Wrath of the Lamb. Or human malice. Watson leaned in, voice low. Holmes, the chapel Bible, prodigal. Fitting, eh? Return before swine devour you. Holmes's laugh barked hollow. Prodigals return solvent, Doctor. I'm bankrupt in body. The vial whispered louder now, withdrawal's nausea roiling. He slipped toward the vestibule, fog pressing at the mullioned windows like a shroud. There, beyond the frosted panes, a shadow detached from the gloom. Tall, cloaked, vanishing into the pea soup. Holmes lunged for the door, coat flapping, Watson calling behind. Sherlock, wait. Gregson, men. But the craving hit peak, knees buckling on the marble steps. He crumpled into snow-dusted ivy, vial tumbling free, glinting under moonlight piercing the clouds. The shadow paused, turned, hood falling back to reveal not a stranger, but a face from his past, Mycroft's courier, eyes wide in recognition. "Mr. Holmes? Message from the Diogenes Club. Urgent. Your brother's suspicions." Holmes snatched the vial, thumb on the plunger, world narrowing to that promise of oblivion. Press and chase the shadow. Resist and unravel Mayfair's web. But as the needle hovered, Crowe's voice echoed from the chapel, "Faith sees beyond." The courier extended a sealed envelope, wax stamped with family crest. Inside, a single word scrawled, "Betrayer." Whose? Lady Hale's, Crowe's, or his own blood? Holmes's hand shook, poison, literal and metaphorical, circling closer. 70 loomed. Dawn crept, fog reluctant to lift. What hand held the final pudding knife? Holmes's fingers trembled around the syringe, the sharp metal tip pricking his skin like a serpent's fang, promising the sharp clarity that fogged thoughts always craved. Snowflakes melted on his lashes as he knelt in the ivy-choked shadows of St. Bartholomew's chapel steps, the courier's envelope clutched in his other fist. Betrayer. The word burned hotter than the cocaine's fire. Mycroft's hand. Or a forgery to lure him deeper into the Mayfair poisonings. The courier shifted uneasily, breath clouding in the pre-dawn chill. "Sir," your brother insists, "the Diogenes Club has eyes on Lady Hale's townhouse. Movement last night, servants fleeing." Holmes's vision swam, withdrawal gnawing like rats in his veins. Pressed the plunger, and the world sharpened. Resist. And the shadows blurred into madness. He hurled the syringe into the snow, where it vanished like a sin confessed. Not yet. The game demanded sobriety's edge. Rising unsteadily, he snatched the envelope fully, tearing it open under the gas lamp's feeble glow. Inside, not just the scrawled word, but a pressed flower. Deadly nightshade, belladonna petals curling black. Professor Crowe's calling card. And a note in Mycroft's precise script. "Victoria Hale hosts a midnight supper tonight. Attend. The puddings serve more than dessert." Watson burst through the chapel doors then, revolver half drawn, Gregson lumbering behind with 2 constables, lanterns swinging like pendulums. Holmes, what devilry! A shadow, Holmes rasped, pocketing the flower. Mycroft's man points to Hale and Crowe. Gregson snorted, rubbing his side whiskers. "Your brother's games again? We've 70 families retching antimony from those cursed puddings, Holmes. Chapel philosophizing won't catch the baker." The inspector eyed the disturbed snow, boot-crunching glass from the shattered vial. "Cocaine remnants. Pull yourself together, man, or I'll haul you in for public endangerment." Watson's hand clamped Holmes's shoulder, warm and steady amid the cold. "Easy, Gregson, he's chasing leads we can't see." "Sherlock, inside. Pray or pace, but not alone." Prayer. The word stuck like gristle. Holmes shrugged off the touch, striding into the vestibule where Lady Hale and Crowe waited, flames guttering in the Advent wreath. The widow rose gracefully, emerald eyes appraising his dishevelled state. "Mr. Holmes, you look as if the Ripper himself pursued you. Sit." "Tea?" Crowe leaned on his cane, frail frame silhouetted against stained glass depicting the prodigal's return. "Revelations speak of poisoned cups, detective. The 7th seal. Silence in heaven. What silence hides your poisonings?" Holmes ignored the chair, pacing the flagstones worn smooth by centuries of penitence. "Madam, your husband's death. Antimony traces in his brandy, matching the puddings. And you, Professor, your lectures on biblical toxins. Belladonna in the wreaths." Lady Hale's laugh tinkled like crystal cracking. "Grief, not guilt." "Reginald choked on excess," the doctor said. "As for the puddings, Mayfair's bakers sourced from Hale imports. Sabotage perhaps by rivals." Crowe's eyes gleamed behind spectacles, or divine judgment on gluttony. Christmas feasting, 70 souls purged. Proverbs warns of honeyed words and poisoned arrows. "Enough riddles," Holmes snapped, mind racing despite the ache. "Gregson, raid the bakeries at dawn. Watson, check Hale's ledgers. I go to her townhouse tonight. Gregson balked. Alone? With your condition. The word landed like a slap. Condition. Holmes felt it then, the void yawning wider, every nerve screaming for the needle's kiss. But the belladonna petal crinkled in his pocket, a talisman or trap. Faith sees beyond, Crowe had said. Beyond what? Rationality? Watson pulled him aside, voice urgent in the alcove's hush. Sherlock, this is the struggle. You've glimpsed the light. Don't plunge back. Remember Afghanistan? I dragged you from opium dens before. Grace isn't weakness. Grace. Holmes's lip curled, but doubt flickered. His brother's note burned. Betrayer. Who sold the poisons? Hale's shipments from the Indies laced at source? By noon, Mayfair buzzed under grey skies, carriage wheels churning slush, as Holmes tailed a Hale servant to the widow's Grosvenor Square mansion. Hale House loomed, gashes of Christmas garlands framing iron gates, fog coiling like incense. He slipped through a servant's door, heart pounding with drawl's drumbeat. Inside, kitchens steamed with plum pudding vats, maid stirring under Lady Hale's watchful eye. No antimony here, too obvious. Upstairs, then. Creeping the back stairs, polished oak creaking under his boots, he reached her study. Desk ajar, papers spilling, shipping manifests, crates from Professor Crowe's university expeditions. Belladonna roots, nightshade extracts, for medicinal research. A floorboard groaned. Holmes froze as the door swung wide. Lady Hale in emerald silk, revolver gleaming. Sherlock, predictable. She circled him, perfume heavy as opium smoke. Join the supper or I'll scream intruder. He snatched a manifest. Your husband's rivals? Or Crowe's experiments funding your ruin? Her smile faltered, eyes darting to a shadowed corner. Reginald discovered Crowe's avocation, biblical poisons for modern sins. He threatened exposure. The pudding silenced him, and tests the faithful. Tests. Holmes's stomach twisted, not just from craving. 70 families as lab rats. She holstered the gun, stepping closer, hand brushing his sleeve. You're like him, brilliant but broken. Cocaine. I know the signs. Share mine. Pure, from the same crates. The temptation hit like a wave, her vial glinting from a hidden drawer. Press, forget the web. But Watson's words echoed. Grace isn't weakness. No. He backed away, mind piecing it. Crowe tempts with scripture, you with vice, the betrayer your alliance. Laughter from the hall. Crowe entered, cane thumping. Perceptive, Holmes, but incomplete. Mycroft's courier? Mine. The note plants doubt. Holmes lunged, grappling the professor's frail form. The shadow on the chapel steps. You. Crowe wheezed, spectacles askew. Judgment comes, prodigal. The puddings purge Mayfair's excess. Revelations foretold. Gregson's bellow cut through. Police! Hale, Crowe, hands up. Constables swarmed, Watson cuffing Hale's wrists as she spat defiance. Holmes slumped against the desk, sweat beading, the vial inches away. Victory soured by the pull within. Gregson clapped his back. Got him confessing en route to Yard. But you, dark night ahead. Indeed. As they dragged the pair away, Holmes pocketed the belladonna, pocketing temptation too. Dawn pierced the fog at Hale House windows, illuminating ledgers proving the plot, Crowe dosing shipments, Hale distributing for profit. 70 saved, but his soul teetered. Watson found him later in the chapel sanctuary, empty now save candlelight. Sherlock, amends begin. 1 hour clean, build on it. Holmes nodded, voice raw. The struggle tightens, John. Crowe's faith was poison. Mine must be real. But as Vespers told, a new shadow crossed the panes, not courier, but a street urchin, envelope in grimy fist, from the baker, Gov. Final pudding, untested, for the Queen's table tonight. Holmes's hand itched for the needle left in snow, race to Buckingham or succumb. The vice tightened, Dawn's hope fragile as frost. If this story has gripped you, hit the like button. It helps reach more people who would love this. The street urchin's grimy fingers thrust the envelope forward, eyes wide with the import of his errand. Holmes snatched it, the paper crisp against his trembling palm, seal unbroken from the baker's mark, a flour-dusted loaf etched in wax. Dawn's frail light clawed through the fog outside Hale House, turning the chapel windows into milky veils. But inside, the air hung heavy with incense and the acrid tang of extinguished candles. His hand itched. The phantom needle's prick a siren call amid the chaos of arrest, confessions and ledgers, stacked like accusations on the desk. Watson appeared at his side, moustache bristling with urgency. Sherlock, the Queen, Buckingham by noon or it's too late. Gregson barked orders to his men, hauling Hale and Crowe into the waiting Black Maria, her raven hair dishevelled, his spectacles glinting with defiant zeal. The professor twisted in the constable's grip, voice a rasp. The final judgment falls at the palace feast, Holmes. Revel in your delay, no time. Holmes bolted from the chapel, coat flapping like raven wings, the belladonna vial heavy in his pocket, a trophy or torment he couldn't yet say. The urchin scampered after, boots splashing in melting frost. "Gov," the baker said, "it's the Pride batch, sent special-like, untested straight from the ovens last night, cab." Holmes roared into the street. Hailing a hansom with a silver sovereign flashed high. The horse's breath steamed in the chill December air, hooves clattering over Mayfair's slick cobblestones as they hurtled toward Baker Street first, his sanctuary of beakers and phials, where answers brewed faster than tea. Watson climbed in beside him, revolver checked and holstered. "You've gone 70 hours without the needle, old chap. This is your crucible." Holmes's mind raced ahead, piecing the thread. Crowe's twisted scriptures funded by Hale's ledgers, shipments of tainted fruit from the colonies, belladonna steeped into brandy syrups disguised as festive cheer. 67 families writhing in St. Bartholomew's wards, visions of angels and demons from dilated pupils. But the Queen's pudding, plated for her Christmas table amid the court's tinsel and holly, untested as the urchin swore. One bite and Empire's heart stilled. The cab lurched to a halt outside 221B, gas lamps guttering low. Mrs. Hudson peered from the door, shawl clutched tight. "Mr. Holmes, such a racket at this hour. Tea?" No time. He vaulted the 17 steps, Watson puffing behind, into the cluttered rooms where violin strings sagged untouched, chemical stains scarred the table. The syringe lay on the mantel, cocaine residue crystalline like fallen snow. His fingers hovered, pulse thundering, just one prick to sharpen the edges, to outrun the fog in his veins. Watson saw it, hand firm on his shoulder. "Not now. Test the sample. The urchin has it." The boy produced a cloth-wrapped bundle from his rags, the pudding's weight dense, raisins plump with promise or peril. Holmes snatched a scalpel, slicing deep. The scent rose, cinnamon, sweet, dark fruit laced with something sharper, almond bitterness beneath. A drop on litmus, then microscope slide. Belladonna alkaloids confirmed. But more, a synthetic stabilizer. No, something biblical in its subtlety. Oleander extract, Crowe's alchemical touch from greenhouse sermons. We ride to the palace. Holmes pocketed the evidence, ignoring the syringe's gleam. But as they spilled back into the cab, hurtling through waking London, omnibuses rumbling, vendors hawking chestnuts, the pull gnawed deeper. Boredom's old friend whispered, "Solve this, then reward." 70 hours clean felt like chains, not freedom. Watson filled the silence with steady words. Gregson wirelessed ahead. "The palace guard awaits. You've saved Mayfair. Now the throne." Buckingham Palace loomed through the thinning fog, iron gates flanked by scarlet-coated sentries, holly wreaths framing the arches. An equerry met them at the service entrance, face pale as lard. The royal kitchens, chaos. The pudding awaits the sideboard, Her Majesty insistent on tradition despite the scandals. Inside, steam billowed from vast copper vats, cooks in whites darting like panicked ghosts. The master baker, Elias Trent, no relation to Crowe but a Mayfair supplier, wiped floury hands, eyes darting. "Mr. Holmes, the shipment came pristine, I swear." Professor Crowe himself blessed it at the ovens, quoting proverbs on gluttony's folly. Blessed. Holmes's lip curled, vision blurring at the edges, fatigue or withdrawal. He seized the massive pudding mould, silver dome engraved with Victoria's cipher, and pried it open. The The dome clanged to the flagstones, revealing the gleaming orb, flames ready with brandy. A slice tested on the spot. Positive. The equerry gasped. "God save us, the feast assembles. Evacuate the hall," Holmes commanded, but the palace stirred. Guests arriving in carriages, the Queen's piper warming notes in the distance. Watson rallied the guards, while Holmes scoured the kitchens for accomplices. Trent backed away, stammering, "Just a favour for the lady." Hale's order slipped in the night batch. There, a hidden crate behind the spice racks, stamped from Hale's warehouses, residue staining the wood. Holmes's knees buckled then, the room spinning, cold sweat sheeting his brow. The itch became fire, veins screaming for the 7% solution. He gripped the table, nails digging into oak, flashbacks crashing, empty Baker Street nights, cocaine dreams dissolving puzzles into euphoria. Watson caught him as he swayed. "Breathe, Sherlock. Grace in the gale, this is your dark night. Remember the chapel. The candles flicker without Crowe's poison. Grace." The word anchored him, raw as prayer. Not rationalism's cold blade, but something warmer, human. He straightened, directing the guards to quarantine the feast. The Queen was informed in her withdrawing room, her small frame rigid in black bombazine. "Mr. Holmes, your methods unconventional but effective. Mayfair whispers of miracles this Yuletide. Miracles." As the palace bells tolled noon, the pudding consigned to the Thames under guard, Holmes stepped into the courtyard. Relief washed Mayfair's chill away, but the struggle coiled tighter. Gregson arrived, puffing a cigar. Case cracked wide. Hale and Crowe singing like canaries at the yard. "But you look like death, Holmes." "Needle calling?" Holmes met his gaze, gaunt face etched deeper. Every victory tempts relapse. Watson nodded solemnly. One step, then another. Yet as they turned for Baker Street, a royal footman approached, envelope in gloved hand. "From Mycroft, sir. Urgent. Another shipment, not pudding. Wine for the orphan's Christmas fete at St. Mary's." Crowe's last laugh? Holmes's hand twitched toward his pocket. The vial's weight a devil's dice. Test it, or surrender to the fog within. The palace shadows lengthened, hope's thread fraying once more. The hansom waited, horse stamping impatiently as Watson's eyes pleaded silent faith. "Sherlock, choose life." But the envelope burned like litmus paper, revealing stains no eye could yet see. The urchin from dawn lingered at the gates, watching. Loyal or Crowe's final pawn? The vice squeezed, unrelenting, as snow flurries danced in the gaslight haze. Holmes tore open the envelope with trembling fingers, the crisp vellum crackling like brittle bones in the courtyard's chill. Mycroft's script marched across the page, precise as a military dispatch. "Shipment of mulled wine arrived at St. Mary's Orphanage this morning, destined for tomorrow's Christmas fete. Unmarked crates from Crowe's Mayfair warehouse. Test immediately. Children at risk." The words blurred for a heartbeat, cocaine's siren call whispering through his veins, promising clarity amid the storm. He crumpled the note, stuffing it into his ulster pocket, and waved off the hansom. Watson gripped his arm, voice low and steady. "Sherlock, you're in no state. Let Gregson handle this one. Rest at Baker Street." Holmes shook him loose, grey eyes flashing with that old fire. "Rest is for the dead, John. Those children, 67 families already scarred by pudding poison. Crowe's venom can't claim innocence on Christmas Eve." Gregson snorted, cigar smoke curling into the snowflakes. "Bloody hell, Holmes. You've cracked Hale and Crowe, got the Queen praising your name. Why chase shadows now?" But Holmes was already striding toward the gates, boots crunching frost-laced gravel. The urchin boy melted into the palace shadows, his ragged coat blending with the iron railings, eyes like polished coals tracking every move. Loyal witness or Crowe's whisper in the fog? The cab rattled them through Mayfair's gaslit labyrinth, pea-soup fog-swallowing carriages and muffled carolers. St. Mary's loomed at the district's edge, a squat Victorian chapel of soot-streaked stone, its spire piercing the low clouds like a desperate prayer. Warm light spilled from arched windows, silhouettes of orphans in threadbare smocks stirring pots inside. The scent of cloves and cinnamon wafted out, mocking the dread twisting Holmes's gut. Sister Agnes met them at the heavy oak door, her face a map of lines etched by too many winters, habit starched crisp despite the damp. Mr. Holmes, a blessing. The wine arrived unbidden. Generous souls, they said, for our little one's fate, but with the poisonings. She trailed off, wringing flour-dusted hands. Holmes pushed past, nostrils flaring at the undercurrent of almonds beneath the spice. Cyanide's bitter kiss. In the refectory, crates stamped with Crowe's crest squatted like silent conspirators amid trestle tables. Orphans peeked from corners, wide-eyed mites with hollow cheeks, their laughter brittle as they strung paper chains. One girl, no more than 8, clutched a rag doll, staring at Holmes's gaunt frame as if he were a ghost from the Ripper's tales. He knelt by a crate, syringe glinting in his palm. Not cocaine this time, but his testing kit, vials of reagents clinking softly. Watson hovered, mustache twitching. Steady now. You've beaten the needle before. Holmes's hand shook as he pierced the cork, drawing deep red liquid that swirled like congealing blood. The itch clawed deeper, memories flooding, Baker Street's empty hours, the hypodermic's plunge erasing ennui's void. Grace, he mouthed silently, the chapel's candle flickering in his mind, Crowe's false light, yet a spark of something purer amid the professor's lies. A drop hit the litmus, color shifting to damning purple. Poisoned. Holmes exhaled, the room tilting. All of it, wine laced with strychnine traces, enough to convulse a dozen children in festive agony. Sister Agnes gasped, crossing herself. Merciful heaven, the fates tomorrow, hundreds from the parish. Gregson burst in, coat shedding snow, yards sealing the warehouse. Hales confessed. Crowe cooked the batches in his lab, her ledgers funding it for insurance scams on the elite. But the wine? She swears ignorance. Holmes rose, swaying, vision sharpening on the orphans' faces. Innocence weaponized. Crowe's arc of vengeance for slights imagined in his fractured mind, poisoning Mayfair's heart to watch it bleed. The professor's voice echoed from memory, frail tones in the chapel interrogation. Science demands sacrifice, Mr. Holmes, purity through fire. Holmes had seen the man's eyes then, fever bright with zeal, not unlike religious mania, alchemist's dreams twisted into murder. But grace. Crowe spat the word like heresy, even as his own poisons ravaged Hale's crumbling empire. Watson steadied him toward a side chapel, away from the chaos. Sit. Breathe. Holmes slumped onto a pew, the wood groaning under his lean frame. Cold seeped through his trousers, mirroring the frost in his soul. John's hand on his shoulder felt like an anchor in the gale. You've saved them, Sherlock. That's the work of light, not shadows, light. Holmes's fingers brushed his pocket. Vial's curve pressing insistent. One prick, and deduction's edge returns unclouded. He withdrew his hand empty, staring at the altar's single candle, real flame this time, guttering in the draught, casting shadows that danced like lost puzzles. The orphans' voices filtered through, tentative hymns rising, God rest ye merry gentlemen. Fear threaded the melody, yet hope clung stubborn. Footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate. The urchin boy slipped in, cap clutched in grimy fists. Mister, I seed him. Professor Crowe last night by the river, whispering to a boatman, crates floating off. Holmes leaned forward, hawkish nose twitching. Where, lad? Speak plain. The boy swallowed, eyes darting. Blackfriars Wharf, Gov. Said it'd be the finale, Christmas gift for the orphans. Holmes surged up, mind racing ahead of the pain. Finale. Not just wine, something larger, adrift on the Thames, timed for the tide. Gregson lumbered in, warehouse empty, false lead. Hale's talking more, says Crowe had a partner in the palace kitchens. Royal seal on the crates? Holmes's pulse thundered. Mycroft's warning, too precise. Betrayal coils closer. Watson saw the twitch return, Holmes's gaunt cheeks hollowing. John, it's fraying. The solution calls louder than ever. Watson's warm eyes held firm. Then fight it with us, not alone. But as they stepped into the vestibule, Sister Agnes pressed a small parcel into Holmes's palm, a mince pie still warm from the ovens, untainted. For strength, sir, in his name. The pastry's crust flaked sweet against his skin, a humble rebuke to venom's bite. Outside, fog thickened, gas lamps blooming hazy orbs. The urchin vanished into alleys, his tip a breadcrumb or snare. Holmes hailed a growler, directing it to Blackfriars. The Thames waited, dark and churning, cradling Crowe's endgame. Yet as wheels clattered over cobbles, the vial burned hotter, Grace's thread snapping taut. Watson watched him sidelong, the cab's sway mirroring inner turmoil. Sherlock, the chapel taught you, light pierces fog, but only if you let it. Holmes nodded faintly, Pye's warmth fading in his fist. But what if the poison's in the blood already? The river loomed ahead, its secrets murmuring like temptation's tide. At Blackfriars the wharf reeked of tar and fish guts, lanterns swinging wild in the wind. A lone boatman huddled by a bollard, pipe glowing ember red. Holmes approached, shadow long across the muck. The crates, where to? The man spat, rheumy eyes narrowing. Gone with the ebb, Gov. Professor paid handsome, said it'd surface at Westminster come dawn, just in time for the regatta lights. Festive fireworks over poisoned waves. Holmes's mind whirled, trajectory calculated, current mapped. Westminster Pier, orphan boats mingling with revelers. Catastrophe scripted. He turned to Watson and Gregson, voice steel despite the fire within. We intercept at first light, no time for weakness. Back in the cab, racing through midnight streets, Holmes crushed the pie remnants, sugar dusting his gloves like fallen snow. The vial tempted once more, promising victory's rush. Grace or abyss? The bells of St. Mary's told the hour, a sombre knell. But as Mayfair's spires faded, a figure detached from a doorway, Lady Hale's maid, face pale under a shawl. "Sir," she hissed, "Crowe escaped custody. He's loose, with the formula for an airborne mist, the palace itself." The words ignited panic's fuse. Holmes's hand dove for the pocket, fingers closing on glass, one dose to outthink madness. Watson seized his wrist. "No. Faith now, Sherlock. In us. In something greater." The struggle peaked, unrelenting, as the hansom plunged into fog's embrace. Dawn's poison waited, and with it, redemption's razor edge. The hansom cab rattled through the thickening fog of Mayfair's back alleys, its lanterns cutting feeble yellow paths like dying stars. Sherlock Holmes's fingers trembled around the vial in his pocket, the glass smooth and insistent against his palm, whispering promises of clarity amid the chaos. The cocaine's allure gnawed deeper now, a serpent coiling in his veins, urging him to inject the sharp euphoria that had always unlocked his mind's locked doors. But Watson's grip on his wrist held firm, unyielding as iron, his friend's breath ragged in the confined space. "Not tonight, Holmes. Not when the stakes are souls, not puzzles." Holmes yanked his hand free, eyes blazing in the dimness, but the words struck like chapel bells from that desperate midnight service days before. "Light pierces fog," the vicar had said, "if you open the shutters of the heart." Reason scoffed, yet something stirred. A flicker, unfamiliar and warm, battling the cold logic that had isolated him for years. The cab lurched to a halt outside Hale Manor, its grand Georgian facade looming like a shadowed sentinel under gaslight. Icicles clung to wrought-iron gates, dripping in the chill December wind that carried faint echoes of carolers from distant streets. Lady Victoria's residence, once a bastion of Mayfair elegance, now pulsed with suspicion. The maid who had flagged them down huddled at the servants' entrance, her shawl clutched tight, face gaunt from fear. Professor Crowe's slipped the yard's net not an hour past, she stammered as they descended, boots crunching on frost-laced gravel. Took a carpet-bag heavy with vials and papers, muttered about mist and majesty falling come dawn. Her ladyship's in hysterics upstairs, won't say a word. Gregson barreled forward, his burly frame shoving the door wide, the scent of beeswax polish and wilted holly wreaths assaulting them. "Scotland Yard's finest," he growled to the footman who appeared, sputtering protests. "Lead us to her ladyship. Now." Inside, the manor's halls echoed hollowly, portraits of stern ancestors gazing down with painted judgment. Holmes moved like a spectre, cataloguing details. A spilled teacup on the marble sideboard, saucer shattered like fragile trust. A velvet glove discarded on the stair, embroidered with the Hale crest twisted askew. Upstairs, in the drawing-room aglow with Christmas candles sputtering in crystal holders, Lady Victoria Hale paced, her raven hair dishevelled from its Gibson girl updo, emerald eyes wild with a terror that stripped away her porcelain poise. "Victoria," Holmes said softly, stepping into the firelight's warmth that did little to thaw the room's icy dread. The maid spoke of Crowe. What did he leave behind? "Speak plainly. We race the Thames's tide." She whirled, clutching a lace handkerchief, her voice fracturing like thin ice. "He came through the hidden passage from the Mews, Sherlock, knew my debts, my desperation after father's shipping empire crumbled in '86, offered salvation, a formula to thin the fog into a mist, airborne, undetectable. Plum duff and mince pies laced for Mayfair's elite, but this for the palace revels. Antidote only for those who pay his price. I refused the final bargain. He vowed the crown itself would choke on poisoned revelry." Watson's mustache twitched with restrained fury, his scarred hand flexing as if remembering Afghan battlefields. "Blackmail, then. And the 67 families. Your trial run." Her nod was a sob, shoulders heaving. "Test batches in puddings delivered to indebted houses. So I thought it feigned, placebo sense to scare payments. But the deaths? Real. God forgive me." Holmes's mind raced, piecing the mosaic. Crowe's frail stoop hiding a venomous intellect, his university disgrace in '75 for unethical experiments fueling this vendetta against society's pillars. The professor's motivation crystallized, not mere greed, but a twisted theology of leveling the exalted. Grace for the fallen, perdition for the proud. Gregson snorted, pacing to the window where frost etched patterns like accusing fingers. Motive's fine, but the man's ghosted. We'll drag Westminster at dawn, net the lot. Yet Holmes felt the vial pulse again, the tempter's voice hissing, "One dose and see it all." Outthink the madman. His hand twitched toward the pocket, sweat beading despite the cold. Watson noticed, eyes narrowing with that brotherly vigilance honed over years of watching Holmes teeter on edges. "Faith, Sherlock," Watson murmured, pulling him aside into the shadowed alcove by the grand piano, its keys silent witnesses. "The chapel showed us, grace isn't earned by brilliance alone. It's received in weakness." Holmes's laugh was bitter, hawk-like nose flaring. "Faith? A crutch for the dull-witted." Yet the words echoed the vicar's sermon, piercing his rational armor. The warmth of the chapel's candlelight, the communal hush of broken souls lifting hymns, had it planted a seed? His gaunt frame sagged against the wall, grey eyes distant, replaying the wreckage, the poisoned feasts, orphans weeping over empty chairs. Mayfair's Christmas cheer curdled to morning. "Comment who you suspect, dear listener. Can you solve it first?" Lady Victoria approached then, pressing a crumpled letter into Holmes's palm, her touch lingering with unspoken plea. Crowe's hand, from his study safe. Coordinates scribbled, Lambeth Side Tunnel, pre-dawn rendezvous with a chemist contact. He's arming the mist there. Before the river drop, the revelation ignited action. Gregson barked orders to his constables arriving outside, their lanterns multiplying like fireflies in fog. Holmes pocketed the note, vial momentarily forgotten as deductions surged. Lambeth, slum warrens under Blackfriars shadows, perfect for illicit brewing. Trajectory to Westminster confirmed. They spilled into the night, commandeering fresh hansoms, the wind whipping cloaks as hooves pounded toward the river. Holmes rode with Watson, the cab's sway mirroring his soul's tumult. The fog thickened, swallowing street lamps, muffling distant church bells tolling 3. Sensory assault, the acrid bite of coal smoke, wet wool of coats, the metallic tang of fear on tongues. At Lambeth's fringes, they disembarked amid tenements sagging like weary sinners, windows agleam with tallow stubs. Alleys reeked of gin and offal, rats skittering underfoot. Holmes led, deerstalker low, pipe unlit but clenched in teeth for grounding. Voices echoed ahead, gruff barters in Cockney twang. Through a rusted gate to Crowe's makeshift laboratory, a derelict warehouse by the Thames mudflats, its doors ajar, greenish vapor seeping like spectral breath. Inside, alchemical horror, bubbling retorts over Bunsen flames, crates stamped Hale imports stacked high, Professor Elias Crowe hunched at a scarred table, his stooped frame illuminated by lantern glow, white hair, wild eyes, fanatic gleam. "You," he rasped, spotting them, frail hands clutching a syringe-tipped atomizer. Too late, Holmes. The mist disperses at Regatta's first cannon. Palace guests inhaling doom with festive air. My gospel, equality in agony. Gregson lunged, but Crowe shattered a vial, acrid fumes billowing. Coughs racked them, eyes watering, as the professor bolted for a side door. Holmes pursued, lungs burning, the chase a blur of shadows and splintered crates. Watson fired a warning shot, bullet whining off iron. Out onto the wharf, where the Thames churned black under moonsliver, Crowe teetered on a rotting pier, carpetbag in hand. "Surrender the formula," Holmes demanded, wind tearing words away. "Innocents die at dawn." The professor laughed, a hollow cackle. Innocence? Mayfair's vipers glutted on empire's spoils. This is judgment, divine, distilled. He hurled the bag toward the current, but Holmes dove. Gaunt body snagging it mid-air, crashing into icy shallows. Water shocked like needles soaking through, chilling to marrow. Vial in pocket shattered on impact. Cocaine dissolving into oblivion. Grace's accidental mercy. Crowe raised the atomizer, finger compressing. But Gregson tackled him, the device skittering into depths. Struggle ensued, fists and curses, until irons clicked. As constables hauled the sputtering villain away, Holmes rose dripping, bag clutched. Watson hauling him up with strong arms. Formula secured, antidote yields confirmed inside. Dawn crept, pink fingers brushing spires. Yet Holmes shivered, not just from cold, wreckage of his temptation washed away. Watson clapped his shoulder. "See?" Light pierced, but Holmes's piercing eyes scanned the horizon. Westminster lights flickered. Regatta underway. One sprayer unaccounted, the razor edge honed sharper. Dawn's frail light clawed over the Thames, turning the water to molten lead, as Holmes, Watson and Gregson piled into a waiting hansom cab, the horses' hooves pounding urgency into the cobbles. The air bit sharp with frost, carrying distant echoes of brass bands and cheering crowds from the regatta grounds at Westminster. Holmes clutched the sodden carpetbag to his chest, its contents, a scribbled antidote formula, dripping Thames muck onto his ulster. His mind raced faster than the cab, synapses firing like Guy Fawkes sparklers, piecing the final threads. Lady Victoria Hale. Her name surfaced unbidden, sharp as a lancet. Those emerald eyes at the Mayfair soiree, fluttering false innocence over champagne flutes. Hale imports crates in Crowe's lair, stamped with her crest. The widow's financial ruin whispered in clubs, debts piled like Christmas snowdrifts. Crowe's gospel of equality, her desperation for legacy. She wasn't pawn, she was partner. The missing sprayer nestled in her reticule, no doubt, poised for the palace guests inhaling festive triumph. "We must reach the royal barge before the first salute," Holmes said, voice gravel from the night's fumes. Gregson grunted agreement, wiping sweat from his ruddy brow despite the chill. "Aye, but how?" Crowds thick as porridge. Watson laid a steady hand on Holmes's knee, feeling the tremor beneath. Cold, or withdrawal's first insidious claw. The cocaine's dissolution felt like providence, yet Holmes's hawk-like eyes darted, pupils constricted in the growing light. "You've bested greater odds, old chap. Faith in deduction, or something more?" Holmes met his gaze, a flicker of raw vulnerability cracking the mask. Faith. The word hung, foreign on his tongue, evoking Baker Street hearthfires and Watson's unwavering vigil through countless needle-pricked dawns. Perhaps. But logic demands haste. The cab lurched to a halt at the regatta embankment, disgorging them into pandemonium. Gaslit lanterns bobbed like fireflies amid silk-hatted gentlemen and fur-draped ladies promenading along the frost-rimed path. Oars slapped water rhythmically, crews in striped jerseys straining toward the starting gun. The royal barge loomed majestic, Victoria's crimson canopy fluttering under Union Jacks, courtiers laughing over eggnog and mince pies. Plum pudding aromas wafted, sickly sweet now, laced with memory's poison. Holmes wove through the throng, deerstalker askew, his gaunt frame a shadow slicing merriment. There, Lady Hale, resplendent in emerald velvet, reticule swinging innocently as she chatted with a cluster of Earl dignitaries near the VIP dais. Her raven updo gleamed under lantern glow, porcelain skin flushed with purpose. Gregson signalled plainclothes yardmen, fanning out like beaters flushing game. Holmes approached alone, voice low thunder amid the chatter. "Lady Hale, your professor's folly ends here. The formula is ours. Yield the device." She turned, emerald eyes widening fractionally, then narrowing to slits. "Mr. Holmes, always the uninvited ghost." Her laugh tinkled like shattering crystal. Folly. Crowe merely accelerated inevitability. Mayfairs gorged on empire's blood, opium wars, slave silver in their spoons. My husband's ships brought it all. Now, reciprocity. Her hand dipped into the reticule, emerging with the slender atomizer. Brass glinting malevolently, gasps rippled from onlookers as she raised it toward the barge, where the Queen's consort raised a glass in toast. "One spritz," Holmes murmured, and dawn heralds dusk. Victoria's lips curled triumphant. "Join me, detective. Your mind rivals God's, wasted on puzzles for the privileged." Crowe offered purity. "Your vice distilled cleaner than cocaine. Imagine acuity unbound." Temptation lanced Holmes's core, vision blurring with phantom rush. The old hunger gnawed, amplified by her perfume, jasmine laced with desperation. He saw himself in her, intellect twisted by voids no logic filled. But Watson's voice cut through from yards away. "Holmes, not this shadow again." The doctor's sturdy form pushed forward, mustache bristling resolve, eyes warm anchors. Gregson barreled in, bulk scattering gawkers, but Victoria twisted away, sprayer thrusting skyward as the cannon boomed inaugural salute. Festive haze billowed from gunpowder, perfect veil for her mist. Holmes lunged, fingers grazing her wrist, the atomizer clattering free onto flagstones. It skidded toward the embankment's edge, brass kissing ice. She clawed for it, nails raking his cheek, drawing thin fire lines. "You insect! My legacy!" Gregson seized her arms, irons snapping like dry twigs. "No legacy in murder, madam. You're done." As constables swarmed, Watson knelt by the fallen device, gingerly pocketing it with handkerchief. "Secure," he confirmed, helping Holmes to his feet. Blood trickled warm down the detective's jaw, mingling with sweat. The crowds buzzed oblivious, brass swelling to carols. "God rest ye merry gentlemen," ironic balm. Holmes straightened, breath ragged, the tempter's offer echoing hollow. Purity, legacy, words crumbling like ash. He glanced at the royal barge, guests none the wiser, inhaling mere gun smoke. Antidote teams dispatched at first light. Gregson barked into a runner's ear. "To every afflicted hearth from here to Belgravia." Yet Holmes lingered, staring into the Thames's churn, where dawn gilded ripples gold. Watson stood sentinel, silent query in his stance. The doctor's presence, unyielding through Holmes's nadir nights, syringe wrested from veins, vigils by the fire as delirium raved, stirred something profound. Grace, accidental or not, had washed clean more than river water. "John," Holmes said softly, voice nearly lost in revelry, "this cessation, not mere logic's victory, your constancy, like some divine persistence I cannot deduce." Watson's brown eyes softened, scarred hand gripping Holmes's shoulder firm. "Deduction brought us here, Sherlock. But redemption? That's grace meeting effort. You've glimpsed it now. No man islands it alone." Gregson approached, hauling a subdued Victoria, her elegance fractured, eyes defiant pools. "One question, Holmes. How'd you know she'd pulled the trigger?" "Seeds sown early," Holmes replied, mind flashing to her gloved hand at the autopsy. "Faint chemical residue under nails, dismissed then as perfume. Widows weave intricate webs, but truth unravels all." As the inspector led her away, Holmes and Watson drifted to the embankment's quiet fringe, away from Carola's glow. Frost crunched underfoot, breath clouds merging in chill air. Holmes felt the void yawn, cocaine's ghost absent, replaced by unfamiliar clarity. Emptiness, yet laced with possibility. Baker Street waited, hearth aglow, Mrs. Hudson's plum duff steaming redemption-scented. But a urchin's cry pierced the festivity. "Pa, the puddin'! He's seizin' again!" Holmes whirled toward a nearby pie stall, where a lad knelt by a crumpled vendor, foam flecking blue lips. Antidote's hourglass runs thin. One overlooked dose? Watson bolted forward, bag already open, vial glinting, promise. Holmes followed, pulse quickening. Not yet victory. The true restoration dawned not in palaces, but shadowed alleys where grace hunted the forgotten. The vendor gasped as antidote trickled down his throat, eyes fluttering. Crowd hushed, sensing miracle's hush. Holmes knelt too, gaunt hand steadying the man's. "Hold, friend. Light pierces even foggiest night." Yet as cheers erupted anew, a telegram boy threaded the mob, urgent missive in hand. For Mr. Holmes, from Mycroft. Family estate compromised. Final toxin batch unearthed. The razor edge turned inward now. Holmes snatched the telegram from the boy's grimy fingers, the paper crisp against his calloused palm despite the damp fog clinging to its edges. Mycroft's precise script leaped out like a scalpel's incision. Estate overrun. Final arsenic cache discovered in cellars. Crowe escaped custody. Heading your way. Urgent? The words blurred for an instant, not from cocaine's haze, but a rarer fog, one born of buried memory. The family estate, Camden House, that looming Gothic pile on the outskirts of London, abandoned since father's decline, a mausoleum of unanswered letters and Sherlock's deliberate exile. Watson's hand steadied him, warm and unyielding. "What is it, old chap?" "Your face, paler than the vendor's was moments ago." Mycroft. Holmes folded the missive, voice threading steel over vulnerability. "The professors fled. Our cellars hold the last poison." He crumpled it into his pocket, mind racing through alley shadows to the hansom cab rank. The night's fragile peace shattered like thin ice under boot. Grace's whisper from the Thameside vigil faded. Now duty's vise clamped anew, twisting toward the heart he'd long armored. They rattled northward through gaslit sprawl, Mayfair's festooned facades yielding to Hampstead Heath's wilder fringes. Watson murmured prayers under his breath, soft invocations for clarity, for safety, his Afghan scars itching under wool as if sensing old battle lines redrawn. Holmes stared out at skeletal oaks clawing the moon, their branches etched black against sodium glow. Camden House. Childhood echoes surfaced unbidden. Mother's piano in the drawing room, father's chemical experiments in the very cellars now tainted. He'd fled it all for Baker Street's anonymity, cocaine a sharper escape than any estate's ghosts. But tonight, the prodigal's path circled back, laced with arsenic's bitter tang. The cab lurched to a halt, before wrought iron gates sagging under ivy chokehold. Camden House squatted atop its hill, turrets piercing low clouds like accusatory fingers. Windows gaped dark, save one flickering candle in the library, father's old sanctum. No welcoming hearth, instead the air hung heavy with peat moss and decay, frost-rimed lawns crunching underfoot as they approached. Holmes's deerstalker felt absurdly light, his Inverness cape no shield against the chill seeping inward. Mycroft awaited in the porte-cochere, his corpulent frame silhouetted against lantern light, umbrella hooked over arm like a scepter. "Brother." His voice boomed low, resonant with Diogenes' club authority. Gregson's men combed the grounds. "Crowe's tracks lead here. Your legacy unwittingly funds his madness." Holmes's grey eyes pierced the gloom. "Unwittingly." The estate's cellars held father's reagents. Arsenic for vermin, yes, but Crowe procured more. How many puddings laced from our stores? Enough to doom Mayfair's elite twice over. Mycroft's jowls tightened. "But that's not why I summoned you. The professor rants of your shared genius, chemical kinship. He seeks you, Sherlock, not vengeance, alliance." The word landed like a misfired syringe. Kinship. Holmes pushed past, boots echoing on gravel, Watson close behind. Alliance with a murderer. Crowe twisted brilliance into abomination, preying on holiday trust. Yet Holmes's pulse betrayed him. A thrill, faint but treacherous, at the notion of minds matched in alchemy's dark art. They descended the spiral stair to the cellars, air thickening to syrup with damp stone and metallic bite. Lanterns swung from Gregson's constables cast jittering shadows on vaulted arches, revealing oak barrels stamped with family crest, crates pried open to spill vials glinting like malevolent eyes, arsenic trioxide, powdered white death. Enough for legions. One man poured through ledgers, muttering, "Shipments rerouted through Hale's docks, my lord. Lady Victoria's ledgers match." Holmes knelt, fingers ghosting a crate's edge, inhaling the acrid whisper. Father's hand, precision unmatched. Crowe mimicked it, elevated it to horror. But why here? Why now? A scuffle echoed from the far tunnel, boots scraping, a grunt stifled. Gregson bellowed orders, revolver drawn, but Holmes surged forward, Watson's protest lost in the rush. The tunnel narrowed, walls slick with condensation, heart of the estate's underbelly. There, hunched against a wine rack, Professor Elias Crowe wheezed, frail form swallowed by overcoat, spectacles askew on his stooped shoulders. 63 years etched deep. His parchment skin stretched over bird-like bones, wispy beard flecked with dust, but eyes, wild, fever-bright, locked on Holmes like a specimen under lens. Sherlock. Crowe's voice rasped, equal parts reverence and mania. The great detective descends, fitting amid the fruits of intellect. Holmes halted paces away, pipe unlit in pocket, hands empty save for truth's weight. "Your symphony of poison ends, Professor. Puddings poisoned, families felled. Mayfair's ghosts demand reckoning." Crowe laughed, a wet cough bubbling up. "Ghosts? We craft necessity. Arsenic purifies, culls the weak elite bloating society's corpse. Your father's stores my vision, you understand. Boredom's abyss, we fill it with creation. Cocaine your crutch, chemicals mine, join me. Refine the formula. Christmas redemption for the worthy." The temptation coiled serpent smooth. Holmes felt it tug. The old hunger, not for white powder, but for the godlike rush of deduction unbound by morality. Crowe's logic mirrored his own rationalism, cold as cellarstone. Watson stepped forward, moustache bristling. "Enough, man. You've poisoned innocence. Grace isn't selective slaughter." "Grace?" Crowe sneered, scrambling for a satchel at his feet. Vials clinking promise. "Sentiment weakens you both. Holmes, see the purity." In that suspended breath, Holmes glimpsed his reflection in a shattered beaker, gaunt cheeks hollowed, eyes shadowed by years evaded. "No." His voice cracked granite. "Purity demands light, not shadow. Father's chemicals healed, yours corrupt. I choose." Constancy. He lunged as Crowe uncorked a vial, dashing it against stone in a hissing plume. Gregson piled on, cuffs snapping like fate's verdict. Crowe thrashed, shrieking of betrayed genius, dragged upward into lantern light. Panting, Holmes slumped against the wall, dust sifting onto his shoulders. Watson's hand found his again, steady as prayer. "You turned him away." The abyss stared back, "And you chose life, not alone." Holmes met his friend's gaze, the cellar's chill yielding to unfamiliar warmth. "Mycroft's doing, Gregson's net. Your faith, threads weaving what logic cannot." They ascended, estate's weight lifting incrementally. Mycroft nodded approval in the library, fire kindled now, crackling logs chasing shadows from leather tomes and faded portraits. Father's eyes watched from canvas, stern but softened by hearthglow. "Brother," Mycroft said quietly, "the house endures. As do you." Outside, dawn blushed the heath, frost jewels melting under tentative sun. Holmes breathed deep, lungs clear of smoke or syringe. Restoration stirred, not flawless but forged in crisis's forge. Yet as cab horses stamped impatience, a groom approached, face ashen. "Sir, one more victim, from the pie stall last night, rallying but whispers of a letter addressed to you, confession, or threat." Holmes's hand tightened on the rain's ghost. The final thread unravelled, not yet mended. The cab rattled through Mayfair's fog-veiled streets, gas lamps flickering like hesitant stars against the dawn's pallid glow. Holmes's fingers trembled slightly on the envelope, its paper coarse and stained with ink that bled at the edges, as if written in haste under lantern light. The groom had thrust it into his hands with eyes wide as saucers. One more victim from the pie stall, rallying but frail, and this missive delivered by a spectral hand at midnight. Confession or threat? The words clawed at his mind, pulling him from the cellar's triumph into fresh shadow. Watson sat opposite, his sturdy frame silhouetted against the grimy window, mustache drooping with unspoken worry. "Holmes," he said softly, "the weight of the night clings to you still. Let Gregson handle the dregs. You've slain the beast." Holmes slit the seal with his thumbnail, unfolding the single sheet. The script was elegant, feminine loops betraying a cultured hand. Lady Victoria Hale's. His pulse quickened, not from fear but a ghost of intrigue, the old thrill mingling with the warmth he'd claimed in the cellar. "My dear Mr. Holmes," it began, "if these words find you, then Elias has fallen, and the pudding's curse claims its final toll. You think me the veiled hand, the widow spinning webs in Mayfair's salons, but truth, like your cocaine vials, dissolves illusions. Meet me at St. George's Sanctuary before the Vespers bell, or the last breath from the pie stall fades unnamed. Come alone. V." He refolded it, the paper whispering accusations. Victoria. Her emerald eyes had danced at the Christmas fete, her laughter a siren's call amid the poisoned revels. Red herring, his mind insisted, yet Crowe's ravings echoed. Purity demands light. Had she been the forge for his tempter's venom, or something fractured seeking absolution? The cab lurched to a halt outside the victim's modest lodging near the pie stall in Grosvenor Square, where holly wreaths hung limp and blackened from soot. Gregson barreled out first, his burly form shoving through the gathering crowd, maids in starched aprons, constables with notebooks flapping. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of cloves and decay, Christmas pudding residue crusting a bedside table. The victim, a baker named Elias Finch, lay pale as parchment, chest rising in shallow rasps, his wife clutching a rosary at his side. Holmes knelt, inhaling the faint almond bitterness, cyanide's cruel echo. "Pulse weak," he murmured to Watson, "but clinging. The letter. It points to Hale. She summons me to St. George's." Gregson's scowl deepened, side whiskers twitching. "Witch's lure, Holmes. She's fled her townhouse, empty, but for shattered vials. Let me drag her in chains." "No." Holmes rose, gaunt frame casting a long shadow. "This ends with understanding, not irons. You've your net, I'll cast mine." Watson gripped his arm, brown eyes steady as Afghan hills. "Sherlock. The abyss. You've stared it down once. Don't court it again." The words pierced, stirring the void where cocaine once whispered solace. Holmes met his gaze, the intimacy of their bond a lifeline amid unraveling threads. "John, constancy isn't solitary. Your light guided me from the cellar, trust it now." As Gregson marshaled his men to seal the square, Holmes slipped away, hailing another cab toward Hanover Square. St. George's loomed ahead, its spire piercing the lifting fog like a reproving finger. December's chill bit through his ulster, frost crunching underfoot on the portico steps. Inside, the sanctuary breathed hush, polished oak pews gleaming under stained-glass saints, candle flames dancing in brass holders, the faint murmur of Vespers preparation from the altar. Victoria waited in the transept shadows, raven hair unbound, cascading like spilled ink over her velvet cloak. No elegance now. Her porcelain skin was drawn, emerald eyes hollowed by tears or terror. "Holmes," she whispered as he approached, her voice a fragile chime. "You've come. Elias Crowe. He was my shadow, not my master. But the puddings, now they were mine." He halted paces away, hawk-like nose flaring at the incense tang. "Explain. 67 families, Mayfair's heart poisoned at Yuletide, your legacy crumbling, debts to usurers, motive screams." She sank onto a pew, hands twisting a lace handkerchief. "My husband's ship sank in typhoons, fortunes drowned. Crowe promised refinement, his chemicals, pure as prayer, to cull the weak links at the fates, elites glutting on puddings blind to ruin. I baked the first batch in our kitchens, hands trembling over vats steaming with plum duff and death. But Finch. The stall lad saw too much. His pie was meant for a rival banker. Holmes's mind whirled, deductions snapping like frost. her salon invitations aligning with outbreaks, the widow's grace masking calculation. Yet her confession rang not defiant but broken, shoulders heaving, gaze fixed on a crucifix bathed in ruby light from the rose window. "And you summon me here? For arrest or absolution?" Victoria rose, closing the distance, her perfume, jasmine laced with desperation, enveloping him. "Crowe admired you, aped your genius. He said you'd understand. Intellect unbound, morality a chain. Take this." She pressed a vial into his palm, its glass cool and familiar, cocaine crystals glinting within. "Your abyss, Holmes. One dose erases the wreckage. Join the purity or condemn me." Temptation surged, visceral as cellar smoke, the crystalline promise of clarity without cost, euphoria, to drown deduction's toll. His father's estate flashed, chemicals healing fevers, twisted by Crowe's hand into venom. Gaunt cheeks burned, grey eyes locked on the vial, fingers itching to uncork. But Watson's hand in the dust-sifted gloom, Mycroft's nod by the hearth, threads of grace, human and unyielding. No. He dashed it against the stone floor, shards scattering like fallen stars, powder hissing into nothingness. Purity isn't isolation, Victoria. It's light shared, constancy amid chaos. Surrender to Gregson. Let healing begin, however jagged. Tears traced her cheeks, emerald eyes dimming to sorrow's depths. Too late for me. The pies. One last batch, hidden in the crypt below. Finch's wife will fetch it for alms tomorrow. Mercy was never my gift. Her words ignited alarm. Crypt, alms, innocence poisoned anew. Holmes whirled toward the altar, where a grate yawned in the floor, iron rungs descending into chill dark. Before he could call out, Victoria's form crumpled, lips foaming blue, self-administered draught, vial's twin clutched in her fist. "No!" He cradled her head, pulse fleeing under porcelain skin, the sanctuary's hush fracturing into his ragged breaths. Vespers bells tolled, vibrating pews, as footsteps echoed, Watson's voice piercing the nave. Sherlock. Too late. The tragic figure stilled, confession sealed in death. Holmes staggered up, dust and grief sifting onto his shoulders anew, the crypt, puddings hidden. But as Watson burst through with Gregson, a child's cry pierced from the shadows, a street urchin, pie crumb on his lip, swaying pale near the side chapel. The boy, urchin from the stall lured by scraps. Holmes lunged, scooping him as convulsions racked the tiny frame. Gregson the Great, vials below, counteractant now. Chaos erupted, constables swarming the crypt stairs, lanterns bobbing into abyss. Holmes pressed the boy to his chest, heart hammering against fragile ribs, whispering urgently, "Hold, lad. Light breaks through." Watson knelt beside, steady hands forcing charcoal slurry down the urchin's throat. Mycroft's stores from the estate, foresight incarnate. The child's eyes fluttered, colour seeping back like dawn on frost. Yet as the bells faded, Holmes glimpsed a scrawled note tumbling from Victoria's cloak. "Final thread, detective. Father's formula perfected. In your blood. Test it." His veins iced. The abyss whispered once more. Not from vials, but legacy's curse. Restoration dangled, threads fraying toward dawn's promise, or endless night. The crypt's chill clawed upward through the iron grate, carrying the metallic tang of damp stone and forgotten incense. Holmes knelt in St. Bartholomew's nave, the urchin's small chest rising unevenly against his own, each breath a fragile victory wrested from Arsenic's grip. Watson's hands, scarred and sure from battlefields long past, steadied the boy's head, the slurry's bitter residue staining pale lips. Around them, constables' boots thudded like distant thunder, lanterns casting jagged shadows that danced across Lady Victoria's still form, her emerald eyes vacant now, staring at vaulted heavens that offered no reply. Gregson lumbered up from the depths, face slick with sweat, a burlap sack clutched in meaty fists. The puddings, Holmes, 20 of them, wrapped tight, arsenic crystals glinting like frost in the light, smashed them all, but the damage. Gregson's voice cracked, the perpetual scowl fracturing into something raw, paternal almost. The alms route, Finch's wife already out with the first batch for the workhouses. Holmes nodded, the motion mechanical, his mind a whirlwind cataloguing vials shattered below, their venom neutralized in a frenzy of breakage, but the note burned in his pocket, its ink seeping accusation, father's formula perfected in your blood. Test it. Professor Elias Crowe's legacy, not mere poison but a serum, twisted ambition born in shadowed laboratories, tested first on Mayfair's elite during their Christmas feasts. 67 families felled, not by random malice, but a mad bid for immortality, Crowe believing his elixir could defy decay, if only the dosage proved true. He rose, passing the urchin to Watson's care, the boy's fingers twitching toward consciousness. The sanctuary's air thickened with Vesper's echo, candle flames guttering as if in mourning. Holmes's veins hummed, not with cocaine's false fire, but a deeper unease. The injection Crowe had forced during their confrontation in the professor's Mayfair lair weeks back, when Holmes lay bound amid bubbling retorts. A test subject unwitting, the serum mingling now with his blood, promising vitality or virulent death. Watson met his gaze, brown eyes sharpening behind the walrus mustache. "Sherlock, you've gone pale as that lad. What did she mean, your blood? Speak plain, man. We've pulled you from worse dens." "Not worse, John." Holmes withdrew the note, unfolding it with fingers that betrayed a tremor. Crowe's daughter carried his madness, perfecting the formula through those puddings, but the final refinement. "It courses in me." Symptoms delayed perhaps until stress unveils it. He felt it then, a subtle heat blooming in his chest, vision sharpening unnaturally, the nave's stained glass blooming vivid, Mary's sorrowful gaze piercing him anew. Gregson snorted, wiping grime from his ruddy cheeks. "Bah, more of your deductions. We've the lot now, vials, confessions in her ravings before she went." Case closed, Holmes. 67 souls poisoned for some alchemist's folly, but Mayfair breathes again. Breathes? Holmes's voice sliced low, hawkish features hardening. Those families shattered, widows clutching empty chairs at Yuletide tables, children orphaned by convulsions mimicking festivity's joy. And Crowe, escaped still, frail shadow slipping into Whitechapel fog, his work unfinished. "This is no closure. Inspector, it's a reprieve." The inspector bristled, side whiskers quivering. "You've no proof he's fled south. My men scour the docks." Proof enough in her eyes as she died. Holmes turned toward the crypt's maw, the abyss calling with Crowe's whisper. He descended alone, boots echoing on rungs slick with condensation, lantern snatched from a constable's hand. Below, the air reeked of earth and alchemy. Shelves lined with jars of desiccated herbs, a workbench scarred by flame. Victoria's hidden batch reduced to innocuous mash under boot heels. Yet in the corner, a leather-bound ledger, spine cracked like old bones. He flipped it open, gaslight flickering over meticulous script. Elias Crowe, 1823-1888. Trials commence. Subject 1, Hale air, resistant. Dosage escalated. Victoria's notes interspersed, elegant hand betraying desperation. "Father, it burns true now. Immortality or oblivion." Holmes's pulse quickened, the serum stirring, a euphoric clarity flooding synapses, deductions cascading like dominoes. Crowe's flight path, not docks but the old family crypt in Highgate, under Christmas Eve cover, serum stores to perfect upon himself. Surfacing, he found Watson waiting, the urchin bundled in a constable's greatcoat, eyes brightening. "Mister." "Pie was bad," he mumbled, tiny hand clutching Holmes's sleeve. "You saved me." Holmes knelt, dishevelled curls falling into grey eyes softened by unaccustomed warmth. "Aye, lad. And you'll save others. Tell every street soul, no more scraps from Mayfair stalls." The boy nodded solemnly, a spark of resilience igniting in fog-dimmed features. Watson clapped his shoulder. "Mycroft's carriage waits outside. Rest, Sherlock." "The serum." "We'll consult specialists. No time for rest." Holmes straightened, deerstalker shadowing his gaunt face. "Crowe moves tonight. Highgate Cemetery, family vault. if he administers the final dose. Gregson barked orders, men mobilizing. But Holmes slipped away into the fog-shrouded night, hansom cab clattering toward the necropolis. The serum amplified every sense, horse hooves sharp as gunshots, fog tasting of coal smoke and pine from distant wreaths. Inner turmoil churned, not the old ennui craving chemical escape, but a human reckoning. Years of cold logic had isolated him, Watson's loyalty the sole tether. Now, Victoria's tragedy mirrored his own potential fall, brilliance devouring soul. Highgate's gates loomed, wrought iron veiled in hoarfrost, the air crisp with impending snow. Gravestones marched like silent sentinels under moon-pale light, Victorian angels weeping stone tears. Holmes navigated winding paths, pulse thundering, toward the Crowe mausoleum, marble edifice carved with alchemical symbols, jaw ajar. Inside, lantern glow pulsed erratically. Professor Elias Crowe hunched over a stone slab, frail form swallowed by overcoat, syringe glinting in arthritic grip. Ah, Holmes, the voice wheezed, cultured tones laced with mania. Come to witness perfection. My blood too weak, yours proved the catalyst. Victoria's puddings refined it, 67 trials paving the way. Holmes stepped forward, shadows pooling at his feet. Perfection? You've poisoned a district's joy, Professor. Christmas reduced to convulsions, families rent asunder. For what? Eternal life amid graves. Crowe laughed, a dry rattle. Graves claim all, detective. But this... He poised the needle over his vein. Divinity in a drop. The serum surged in Holmes, strength unnatural, mind alight. With a lunge, he seized the syringe, glass shattering on marble. Crowe wheeled, eyes wild behind spectacles, frail fists flailing. You tamper with gods. Struggle ensued, the mausoleum echoing with grunts, Crowe surprisingly feral, nails raking Holmes's cheek. Blood welled, hot and metallic, mingling with serum's fire. Holmes pinned him, knee to chest, the professor's breath ragged. It burns. You feel it too. Transformation, indeed. Holmes gasped, vision blurring, then crystallizing, a profound clarity washing away years of detachment. Not immortality, but humility, the human cost of unbridled intellect. Watson's face flashed, steadfast, the urchin's trust, even Gregson's grudging honor. Grace, not genius alone, redeems. Constables burst in, Gregson at 4, irons clamping Crowe's wrists. The professor sagged, whispering, "Too late." The change begins. Outside, snowflakes spiraled, blanketing Highgate in purity. Holmes emerged, breath clouding, the serum stabilizing, not curse, but catalyst for rebirth. Yet as dawn hinted rosy on the horizon, a rider approached, Mycroft grave-faced. Urgent wire from Baker Street, brother. Another poisoning. Your landlady, Mrs. Hudson. Pudding left on the stoop. The restoration teetered. One final shadow lurking in familiar hearth. Holmes staggered from the mausoleum's chill embrace into the Highgate snow, the serum's fire still coiling through his veins, like a serpent, tasting forbidden fruit. Mycroft's cab loomed black against the whitening dawn, the elder Holmes's silhouette rigid within, umbrella clutched like a scepter of grim authority. "Brother," Mycroft intoned as Holmes approached, his voice a low thunder muffled by fog. "Mrs. Hudson." The pudding arrived at Baker Street an hour past midnight, anonymous parcel tied with holly ribbon. She sampled it warming by the hearth. Convulsions seized her before the parlor clock struck 1. Holmes's mind, sharpened unnaturally by the injection, raced ahead. Residue analysis, delivery route from Mayfair's shadows, Crowe's accomplices unbound. Yet beneath the deductions pulsed something rawer, a pang for the woman who had mothered his chaos these 12 years, her scoldings the hearth of his fractured home. Watson clapped his shoulder, mustache dusted white, eyes fierce with unspoken fear. "We'll save her, Holmes. Cab, now." The horses plunged through waking London, hooves shattering ice on Regent's Park Road, gas lamps flickering their last as rosy light pierced the smog. Holmes leaned from the window, wind knifing his bloodied cheek, the serum granting visions. Chemical cascades rewriting his nerves, not immortality's lie, but a brutal mirror to his own addictions. Cocaine's whisper now drowned by this alchemical grace. He had chased puzzles to numb the void. Now the void chased him, demanding restitution. Baker Street hove into view, 221B's windows aglow with lantern light, a cluster of constables milling like uneasy ghosts. Mrs. Hudson lay upon the parlour sofa, face ashen beneath her lace cap, breath's shallow rasps amid the scent of cloves and burnt sugar. "Doctor," she murmured weakly as Watson knelt, fingers probing pulse. "Tasted divine at first. Then fire in my belly. Thought of you boys. Christmas alone." Holmes dropped to one knee beside her, gaunt frame folding, hawkish eyes tracing the symptoms, dilated pupils mirroring his own, tremors subtle yet inexorable. The same serum variant, refined by Victoria's kitchens. Crowe's genius twisted into malice. Mycroft loomed in the doorway, relaying Gregson's wire. Lady Hale vanished from custody overnight, a guard bribed, trail leading to the Thames docks. "She's the courier, Holmes. Final shipment tonight, poisoned bounty for the elite's New Year's feasts." Guilt clawed Holmes's chest, sharper than any needle. He had deduced her feigned innocence too late, seduced by her emerald gaze and Mayfair poise into overlooking the widow's desperation, debts from her magnate husband's crash, legacy crumbling like fog-wreathed spires. "Victoria," he whispered, hand hovering over Mrs. Hudson's clammy brow, "not malice alone, but fear of oblivion, much like my own." Watson administered charcoal slurry from his bag, steady hands belying the tremor in his voice. "Hold on, dear lady. You've scolded sense into worse reprobates than us." Holmes rose abruptly, mind-fracturing light into prisms, antidote formula crystallizing from serum's echo in his blood, morphine counteragent, ipecac purge, herbal binders from his chemistry bench. He bolted upstairs, vials clinking in frenzy, cocaine lamp discarded like a shed skin. No more veils. This clarity demanded action pure. Downstairs, Mrs. Hudson stirred under Watson's care, colour creeping back as the slurry took hold. The doctor's brown eyes met Holmes', a silent covenant forged in Afghan scars and Baker Street vigils. "You've changed, old chap. Not the serum, the sight of her fading." Holmes nodded, vial steaming in palm. "Grace in extremity, Watson." Crowe sought godhood. I glimpsed humility. Gregson barreled in then, burly frame steaming snowmelt, side whiskers bristling. "Holmes," Hale's scent at the docks, steamship bound for continent, crates stamped, Hale imports, festive delights. "We blockade the wharf, but your word, poison or ploy?" Holmes pressed the antidote into his palm. "Administer to victims en route. She's no mere widow, Crowe's disciple. Serum her salvation from ruin. Confront her with mercy's edge." The inspector scowled, yet pocketed the vial with a grunt. "Mercy? 67 souls twist in agony across Mayfair wards. But your hunches save more than yard plods." As Gregson rallied men, Holmes turned to Mycroft. "Government whispers of cover-up, brother. Scandal buries the Crown's Christmas." Mycroft's gaze pierced. "Paternal weight heavy. Expose truth, Sherlock, but spare the innocent wreckage." Cab rattled anew toward Thameside gloom, fog thick as absolution's veil, the river's lap a dirge under Blackfriars Bridge. Holmes's pulse thrummed with serum's gift, visions of Victoria sharpening. Her raven hair unbound in desperation, porcelain skin marred by moral fracture. She had tempted him once in Mayfair's gaslit parlour, emerald eyes promising puzzles laced with peril. Now, redemption's precipice. Docks emerged spectral, cranes like gallows arms, crates stacked amid fish-gut stench and tar. Constables swarmed, Gregson barking orders. There, Hale's figure, cloaked silhouette slipping toward the gangplank, satchel bulging with vials. Holmes sprinted, boots crunching frost, Watson at flank. "Victoria?" She whirled, eyes wide in lantern glow, hand dipping to satchel. "Holmes, you live. The professor swore the mausoleum your tomb." Her voice cracked, Gibson updo frayed, elegance unraveling. This serum, it promised rebirth. My ledgers bleed red. Christmas feasts were mercy sales, salvation for the dying elite. Holmes closed distance, hands open, serum's fire tempering his old disdain. Salvation? You've sown death in pudding bowls, families shattered at hearths. Crowe manipulated your fear, as cocaine did mine. Take the antidote. End this. She laughed bitterly, backing toward Plank's edge, Thames churning black below. Too late, detective. I've dosed myself. Feel the change? Her tremor matched his, unnatural vigor in limbs, eyes alight with Crowe's delusion. Watson flanked left, Gregson right, irons glinting. No traps, Holmes urged, voice raw. Grace redeems Victoria. Effort and community, not solitude's alchemy. Mycroft's network awaits. Asylum care, debts forgiven. Choose life amid the fog. She hesitated, satchel slipping, vials shattering on planking, hiss of serum meeting brine. The change. Ed burns false promises, tears carved tracks in her powder. For my son lost to fever last winter, this was vengeance on a cruel world. Holmes stepped closer, gaunt hand extended. Vengeance blinds. I know, puzzles my opium, detachment my grave. Mrs. Hudson lives, Mayfair mends. Join the restoration. Constables closed gentle, her wrists bound not in irons but linen restraint. Sobs echoing over water. As she sagged against Watson, Gregson clapped Holmes's back. Grudging nod, detective. Humanity suits you. Back at Baker Street twilight, Mrs. Hudson sat propped with tea, colour returned, scolding feebly. Never again, Mr. Holmes. Pudding from strangers. Laughter rippled, Mycroft pouring brandy, Watson's moustache twitching mirth. Yet as snow blanketed gaslit streets, a urchin rapped the door, Billy from the irregulars, eyes hollow. Governor, another note, not poison this time. From Crowe, escaped custody. Final formula hidden in Mayfair's heart. The church crypt. Restoration's final shadow stirred. Grace tested anew in sacred stone. Snow fell thicker now, blanketing Baker Street in a hush that muffled even the distant clamour of carolers. Holmes paced the sitting room, cocaine vial discarded in the fire's grate, its ashes a faint reminder of temptations past. Watson watched from his armchair, pipe smoke curling like unspoken worries, while Gregson nursed a brandy, his scowl softened by the room's hearthglow. Mycroft had slipped away into the night, his network already hunting Crowe, but the note burned in Holmes's pocket. Final formula in the crypt beneath St. George's in Hanover Square, Mayfair's shadowed heart. We can't wait for dawn, Holmes said finally, voice steady, but edged with the rawness of recent mercy. Crowe flees not from law alone, but delusion's grip. That crypt holds more than poison, his soul's last stand. Watson rose, revolver checked with surgeon's precision. Then we end it together, old chap. No more solitary deductions. Gregson grunted agreement, Coach shrugged on. Aye, but Scotland Yard leads this dance now. Carriage wheels crunched virgin snow as they rattled toward Hanover Square, gas lamps blooming halos in the fog. St. George's loomed, its spire piercing the low clouds like a silent accusation. Christmas Eve, vespers spilling organ notes into the chill. The side door yielded to Holmes's picks, lock whispering surrender. They descended stone stairs, lantern light dancing on damp walls etched with centuries of prayers. Air grew thick, cloying with incense and mould, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the vaulted dark. Crowe's rasp cut the gloom first. Come for salvation, detective, or judgment. He crouched amid tiered shelves of bone-dust ledgers, frail form hunched over a brass-bound chest, spectacles glinting like false stars. Vials gleamed within, serum shimmering emerald. The final batch, enough to taint Yuletide across the empire. Holmes advanced slowly, boots scraping flagstones worn smooth by mourners' feet. Salvation through death, Professor. Your serum rebirths monsters, not men. I've tasted false highs, cocaine's clarity, a lie colder than this crypt. Crowe laughed, a wet cough rattling ribs beneath threadbare tweed. Monsters? Mayfair's elite gorged on my husband's fortune, left Victoria widowed and broken. This elevates the fallen. Feel it in your veins, Holmes, the intellect unbound. He held a syringe aloft, needle-catching lantern flicker, his eyes fever-bright with the very madness he'd brewed. Watson gripped Holmes's arm, whispering fierce, "Steady." He's cornered, but venomous still. Gregson drew his truncheon, voice booming off arches. "Elias Crowe, you're under arrest for murder by poison. 67 souls, Christmas ruined. Hands up, or by God." But Crowe lunged, not at them, but the chest's lever. A hiss erupted, greenish mist coiling like serpents from hidden vents. The crypt's ancient air defense twisted to horror. Coughs seized them, Holmes's vision blurred, lungs burning as if inhaling Thames brine. Watson staggered, clapping a handkerchief to his mouth, while Gregson swung wild, connecting with air. Through watering eyes, Holmes saw truth uncoil. Not mere poison, the serum's vapor. A airborne rebirth promising Crowe escape in chaos. "You engineered this sanctuary's fall?" he gasped, deduction piercing haze. "Parish records hid your formula, etched in baptismal stone. But why the church? Faith's mockery?" Crowe sneered, injecting his own arm, veins bulging unnaturally. "Faith abandoned me, wife dead to cholera, tenure stripped for unorthodox cures. This is gospel anew, evolution's elixir. Join or perish." Holmes dropped to knees, mind racing past pain, memories flashing, his own rock bottom, syringe trembling in 221B, Watson's hand staying the plunge. Grace, not genius, had pulled him back. Community's quiet insistence, Mrs. Hudson's scones, Lestrade's gruff nods. He clawed forward, snatching a fallen vial, hurling it at the chest's mechanism. Glass shattered, mist thickening, then dissipating as gears jammed, Crowe's hiss turning to rage. "You insect!" Crowe charged, frail strength amplified, hands clawing for Holmes's throat. Watson fired a warning shot, bullet ricocheting off stone, buying seconds. Gregson tackled low, bear hug pinning the professor amid skeletal relics. Struggle twisted them, Crowe's whispers manic. "The serum lives in me, immortal now. Release it or London burns eternal Yuletide fever." Holmes rose, vision clearing, extended hand not in violence but plea. "Immortal. You're a ghost already, Elias, haunted by loss, peddling ashes as phoenix fire. I chased puzzles to flee my voids. You brewed death to spite yours, but voids fill not with venom but voices. Victoria chose linen bonds over the plunge. Mrs. Hudson brews tea above our wreckage. Let Mycroft's healers reach you. Grace demands effort but offers it free." Crowe faltered, syringe arm drooping, unnatural vigor ebbing as antidote vapors from the shattered chest worked subtle. His eyes, once alight, dulled to despair's grey. "For my Victoria." No, she was never mine. Lies I spun to lure her ruin. The chest. Key in my watch. He sagged in Gregson's grip, fight leeching like crypt damp. Holmes retrieved the fob, unlocking the final compartment. Not more serum, but ledgers, names, dates, Mayfair's elite complicit in trials, scandals buried deeper than bone. As constables swarmed stairs, summoned by Watson's earlier signal, Holmes knelt by Crowe, voice low. "Redemption's crypt holds all, Professor. Law claims your deeds. Mercy, your healing." Crowe nodded faintly, tears carving dust trails. Perhaps a fool's prayer. Outside, snow-swirled cathedral steps, carolers' voices rising pure, silent night, piercing fog. Watson clapped Holmes's shoulder, mustache dusted white. "You've woven humanity into deduction tonight." Gregson pocketed ledgers, rare smile cracking. "Case closed, lads." But as they turned toward carriages, a shadow detached from porch pillars, Lady Victoria, shawl-wrapped, eyes haunted yet clear. "Detective," she murmured, "Mycroft's carriage bore me here." Crowe's whispers in custody. He spoke of a greater vessel. The Christmas pudding served at the Duke's ball tomorrow, tainted at source factory vats in Whitechapel. 67 were but the herald. Holmes's pulse quickened anew. Baker Street's hearth a distant memory. The final test brewed not in stone, but society's glittering core, Mayfair's grandest feast poised for apocalypse. Yet in that suspended breath, Holmes felt shift within. No longer lone genius, but vessel for something vast, grace threading intellect like gold in lead. The carriage waited, snow veiling roads ahead, restoration's blade honed sharp. The carriage rattled through the thickening snow, wheels churning slush on the fog-veiled streets of Mayfair. As Holmes leaned forward, his hawk-like eyes fixed on Lady Victoria Hale. Her revelation hung in the air like the chill bite of winter. The Duke's Christmas pudding, centerpiece of tomorrow's grand ball, poisoned at its Whitechapel source. 67 families had been the mere prelude. A trial run for catastrophe among London's elite. Holmes felt the familiar thrill of deduction surge, but laced now with something unfamiliar, a weight of lives beyond the puzzle, souls teetering on eternity's edge. Watson shifted beside him, his sturdy frame tense under the wool greatcoat, scarred hand gripping the seat as gas lamps flickered past like dying stars. Holmes, this cannot stand. The factory. Crowe's ledgers named it Blackthorn Provisions. Vats churning plum duff for half the city. If tainted there. Gregson grunted from the opposite bench, his burly form crammed in with constables, ruddy face flushed despite the cold. Aye, Doctor. But Whitechapel's a viper's nest tonight. Factories shuttered late, workers half mad from Ripper ghosts still whispering in alleys. We'll need warrants, Muscle. Victoria clutched her shawl, emerald eyes shadowed by raven hair escaping its pins, her porcelain skin pale as fresh snow. No time for yard plodding, Inspector. Crowe's whispers to me in the crypt. He boasted of a failsafe, a master batch sealed for the Duke himself. Deliver it tomorrow and Mayfair falls. Not just bodies, but reputations, fortunes. The ledgers prove the elite funded his experiments, desperate for his serum's false immortality. Holmes's mind raced, piecing fragments, Crowe's unnatural vigor from his own elixir, derived from exotic alkaloids smuggled via her late husband's ships. The professor's frail stoop had masked a venomous ambition, preying on the wealthy's fear of death. But grace had pierced him in that crypt, antidote vapors humbling his hubris. Now this final thread, Blackthorn's foreman, a name from the ledgers, Silas Thorne, complicit shadow. The carriage lurched into Whitechapel, where Mayfair's elegance dissolved into squalor. Tenements loomed black against the storm, air thick with coal smoke and the sour reek of tanneries. Horse hooves slipped on ice-slick cobbles, distant shouts of revelers clashing with the wail of a factory whistle. Holmes's pulse quickened, not from cocaine's ghost. It had been weeks since the needle's bite, but from purpose sharpened by recent trials. Baker Street's hearth, Mrs. Hudson's steadfast tea, Watson's unyielding loyalty. They anchored him now where once only intellect sufficed. They disembarked at Blackthorn Provisions, a hulking brick behemoth squatting by the Thames's fetid bend. Steam vents hissed defiance into the night, windows glowing orange from furnace glow. Snow dusted the loading docks like poisoned sugar. Gregson barked orders, constables fanning out with lanterns, truncheons drawn. Holmes slipped ahead, deerstalker cap low, pipe clenched unlit between teeth. Inside, the air assaulted. Scalding heat mingled with the cloying sweetness of boiling plums, raisins, suet. Christmas pudding in monstrous vats, stir.